I'm going to call to order this work session of the Salem City Council, June 26th, on accessory dwelling units. Great. Have the recorder call the roll, please.
Present.
Councilor Anderson.
Present.
Councilor Nanki.
Here.
Councilor McCoy.
Here.
Councilor Ossick.
Here.
Councilor Boyd.
Here.
Councilor Cook.
Here.
Councilor Lewis is absent, and yes, Councilor Mike Evans is present. Mayor Bennett.
I'm here too. Great.
Attorney Dan Atchison. And
That's
Steve
right.
Powers, the manager.
Here.
Great. Did you want to say here? Just so we know you're. Okay. And do we have any additions or deletions?
It's only for the regular council agendas.
Okay, so we're just moving on by that. Okay, we have an information report.
Yes.
Yes. We're pretty excited you're here, Eunice. We were.
But we understand if you'll have to leave.
Yeah, if you have to leave, you just leave, okay? Yeah.
Well, she'll need a ride.
That's my word.
Tom got his bike.
Uber could be here before we can get in our car.
Go ahead, please.
Hi, I'm Eunice Kim, planner with the Community Development Department, here tonight to discuss accessory dwelling units and the proposed code amendment to allow them here in Salem. I just wanted to start by discussing what an accessory dwelling unit, or ADU, is, just as a reminder. Accessory dwelling unit is essentially a second dwelling unit that is attached to or detached from a main house on the same lot. It's usually smaller than that main house. We are not talking about tiny houses on wheels. Those are considered recreational vehicles, RVs, and you are not allowed to live in those on residential property here in Salem. So we're talking about actual dwelling units on the same property as a main house. So, as this slide shows, accessory dwelling units can really be created in a wide variety of ways. They can be additions to your house, conversions of your basement or part of your house. They can be a new structure, say in your backyard, or maybe even a unit above your garage. So there's a lot of ways to create them. And Salem is really the only large city in Oregon that currently doesn't allow them. But we've had a lot of interest from the community over the last few years. We've had residents call, they come to the desk all the time. We've had a lot of recommendations from previous planning studies as well, recommending that we allow them. So we are taking a look at them now. Most recently, we completed the housing needs analysis. This was essentially a 20-year look into the future in terms of what our housing needs are and if we have enough land to meet that housing need. That study came back and basically said, we have enough land in our urban growth boundary for housing generally, but it's not necessarily designated the right way in terms of the uses that we're going to need based on our population projection and on our demographic trends. So while we have enough land for single-family housing, we don't have enough land for multifamily housing. We have a projected deficit of 207 acres. So that means not today, we don't actually have that deficit, but in 20 years, if we weren't to make any code changes or zone changes, anything like that, to address our housing need, we would have that projected deficit of land. So we're actually legally required to meet that projected deficit when we adopt the H&A. So the H&A came back and said, there's obviously this deficit of projected land for multifamily development. These are the different ways we recommend that you meet that need. There's a long list of ways, everything from making it easier to do multifamily development, rezoning land, and then one of the recommendations was to allow ADUs. And we made that choice to put ADUs at the top of the list because we have heard from the community that this is a priority. So that was the first action that we took on our work plan. It's supposed to take roughly 5 years. So cities across Oregon really regulate ADUs in a wide variety of ways. They usually look at the size, the height, how they can be created, whether or not parking is required, design standards. They really vary depending on the community, the needs, the concerns of that community. And so the question really for Salem is, what is the right way to regulate them here in Salem? And that's the question we really brought out to the community during our outreach. We've been doing outreach for about a year. We started out by going to the neighborhood associations and different committees and groups and organizations that basically were interested in hearing what we were going to start planning. Then we had a 14-member advisory committee that included counselors, planning commission members, neighborhood associations, developers, different stakeholders. And we met with them to kind of get their general idea of how they thought ADUs should be regulated. We then had a broader public open house to also get the public's input. And then we went back to the neighborhoods most recently, earlier this year, and brought them our general ideas that we had heard from the public and the advisory committee to get their thoughts again. So we've done a lot of outreach. And we used all that outreach to really come up with our staff recommendation, which we brought to the Planning Commission in April. The Planning Commission did recommend that we allow accessory dwelling units in Salem. They did have 2 revisions to our staff recommendation, which I will talk about tonight. So I just wanted to walk through some of the standards that we're proposing in the code amendment. Like I mentioned earlier, we would be defining accessory dwelling units as a second dwelling unit that's attached to or detached from a single-family home. You would only be able to do 1 per lot. And it would be a use that you could do as of right. You wouldn't have to go through a public hearing process, public notice process, as long as you met specific standards. And those standards I'll walk through tonight. So essentially, the idea would be is to encourage people to do this by not having too much process, but having these standards in place so that they would be compatible with existing neighborhoods. So we're proposing that ADUs be allowed essentially in any zone where a single-family house is currently allowed. So that's all residential zones, most commercial industrial zones, and our mixed-use zone. We're proposing that they be allowed in your side or rear yard. In most cases, they would be in your rear yard if they're detached, for example. But there could be circumstances where you have a corner lot, it makes more sense to do it in the side yard, or you have a wide lot, for example, it just makes more sense to do it in your side yard. We're proposing that the maximum size be 900 square feet or 75% of the main house, whichever is less. The idea here is that with 900 square feet, you could get 2 bedrooms, essentially, in an ADU, and the 75% of the main house would make sure that the ADU was smaller than the main house and proportional to that main house. So, for example, if you had a 1,000 square foot house, your limitation really would be that 75%, not the 900. Whether it was attached or detached from your house, the same restriction would apply. If you had a larger house and the 75% was more than the 900 square feet would really be your restriction. So in terms of height, the maximum height restriction, we're proposing that if it's attached to your house, essentially you would be limited to the same standard as a single-family home. So a new single-family home in the single-family zone can be up to 35 feet high. If it's an addition, it can be 28 feet high, or whatever the size, the height of your house is. For detached, the proposed height restriction is 25 feet. Initially, staff recommended 20 feet. We thought that was a height, based on our research and talking to developers, that you could do a 2-story ADU or an ADU above your garage. The Planning Commission felt that there are some neighborhoods where they're older homes with steeper pitched roofs, so 25 feet would really allow for more compatible design with that roof. Not that it would allow necessarily more than 2 stories, but it would just be more compatible in those older neighborhoods. So they're recommending, the recommendation is now 25 feet high. So for setbacks, if your ADU is attached to your house, it would be regulated basically the same way as an addition would be to your house. So if you did an addition or an ADU as that addition, you could be 3 feet from the side yard, or 14 feet from the rear yard. 14 feet for a single story, or 20 feet for a 2-story. So we would treat it the same as if it was any addition to your house. However, if you had a detached structure, ADU in your backyard, we're recommending 5 feet from both property lines in your rear yard. So currently, if you were to do a garage or a shed or any other detached structure, it can be anywhere from on the property line to 6 feet away based on the height. And we're recommending a consistent 5 feet from both sides. And that's one way to also not push it necessarily into the backyard, so you still have essentially usable backyard space. So the staff recommendation and the planning commission recommendation, this is one of the places where there was a revision. Staff initially had recommended 1 parking spot per ADU. We did hear from neighborhood associations that this was a concern from the neighborhoods. The planning commission wanted to recommend that there was no parking for an ADU for 2 main reasons. One reason is that there's been a lot of research that requiring parking can be a barrier for people to create these, because there just are lots where there's no space to essentially do a parking spot. The other argument was that if you were to require an off-street parking spot, you might need a new driveway or a wider driveway, which would create a curb cut. That curb cut could take away an on-street parking spot, so your net gain would really be 0 in terms of parking. We're also proposing that you are not allowed to do an Airbnb within your ADU. The main point of allowing ADUs is to really increase the supply of housing, not necessarily to increase the number of hotel rooms in Salem. And then we want to make sure that it's clear you can't do an ADU in a vehicle or an RV. It really is going to be a second dwelling unit on your property. And as part of this code amendment, we're recommending that you be allowed to continue to park in your driveway if it leads to your garage and your garage is converted to an ADU. So this would apply to actually any conversion of your garage to living space, but the reason we are doing it as part of the ADU project is that it might be easier to convert your garage to an ADU than maybe build a new ADU in your backyard. And you already have that driveway there with the parking spots, so it'd be better to use that existing parking than just to continue paving your property and adding parking. So that's a change that would impact more than just ADUs, but we've included it as part of this recommendation. So we did receive some public comments. I think you've received them tonight. SCAN had a variety of concerns. One of their main points was that they wanted to only allow ADUs in new developments. They wanted a smaller size than our recommendation of 800 square feet or 50% of the living area of the main house. They didn't want you to be able to rent out both the ADU and the main building. They wanted to require 1 parking space, and they wanted to prohibit them in historic districts. NEN also had some concerns. They were okay with the size that we're recommending, 900 square feet or 75% of the main house, but they did want the owner of the main building to actually live there. They wanted to require 1 space, and they wanted the height of the ADU not to exceed the main building. The realtors supported the code amendment, and then we did get comments from 3 residents. One wanted the parking requirement actually to be determined on a case-by-case basis instead of there being a standard. Another supported the Planning Commission's recommendations for no parking and a higher height of 25 feet. And then 1 opposed ADUs in the single-family zone. So our staff recommendation is to advance the ordinance bill to second reading for enactment. That concludes my presentation.
Any questions? Councilor Hoy.
I just have a question about the Airbnb or the short-term rentals. Is there any evidence that shows that allowing that would actually reduce the units for long-term rentals? I mean, what if somebody wanted to rent their ADU out, like if they were between regular renters? Why would that not be acceptable, and would that really have an impact?
I don't think there's actually been that much research on it since Airbnb is somewhat new. And I think in Portland, they do allow it. I think they do allow it in Portland. But here, the idea is that because we have that projected deficit of multifamily, we're really going to need to justify to the state, essentially, that we're meeting that projected deficit by saying that this is additional housing.
But would not allowing it for short-term rentals really encourage people to, I mean, I guess I don't see the correlation that if you disallow short-term rentals, that it's going to automatically, that people would be building it for a long-term rental just because you say no to short-term rental. You know what I'm saying? I'm not sure if I'm
Like they could do both, essentially? And I should mention that as part of the Airbnb code amendment, we did say that you couldn't do an Airbnb in an ADU already.
Counselor Nagy?
Thank you. Couple questions.
Yeah.
All the zones that you showed the ADUs could be located in, is residential also included in all of those zones currently?
Single family is allowed in those zones, yes.
Okay. Just concerned about industrial and noise and items like that.
And to clarify, in some of those zones, like industrial and some of the commercial zones, single family is allowed as a continued use in some of those, meaning that if it exists today, you can continue to use that single family, but you couldn't do a new single family.
Could you put an ADU on that?
On the existing single family, you
Okay.
could, right.
Tiny houses. I know when we were looking at other things with mobile businesses and what have you, we made the big red bus put itself up on blocks. What's the difference between a accessory dwelling unit and a tiny house that's either been removed from its trailer or put on some kind of a pad or blocked?
Right, so you could potentially use what's a tiny house is and put it on a foundation connected to services and meet all the building code requirements for a dwelling unit and use it as that.
Okay.
Yeah, but you just couldn't, as an RV on wheels, have it on your property.
Yeah, because I know a lot of times with it, they somehow skirted the regulations because they weren't really considered anything as far as a dwelling type unit. So, well, that's good to know. Thank you.
Counselor Cook?
Thank you. I really enjoyed the presentation, but I do have some questions for
Okay.
you. So you've talked a lot about updating the code process, and I was really excited to see how you've incorporated some of the feedback from the neighborhood associations in reviewing these design standards. How have you incorporated universal design, or making sure that we not only have a wider selection of homes, but a greater variety that's available to more people, so that if someone is having to house someone with mobility issues, that we're not creating stock that people won't be able to live in?
So that actually did come up prior at a neighborhood association, and the idea of ADA. And while ADA isn't required for single family and it wouldn't be required for ADU, we could put up information on a website that talks about ADUs, encouraging people to use universal design and how to go about that. But you're right in that we're not requiring it or proposing to require that.
And also, how will the increased density affect the load or capacity on utilities? I know a lot of focus has been given to parking,
Yeah.
but I'm interested in how it would affect stormwater and also just capacity, because we do have aging infrastructure.
Yeah, so we did talk to Public Works, the Public Works director, and especially in the inner neighborhoods that came up a lot, the older neighborhoods, and he said that we do have enough capacity to handle ADUs, but also that the expected number of ADUs that are going to be built aren't necessarily going to be everywhere, especially because they cost roughly, I think, $80,000 on average to build.
Okay.
So I think part of it is the number that would be built in a concentrated area, and also our Public Works director assures me we have the capacity.
And I'm sorry, just with your
Yeah.
permission. So we had talked about how people sometimes do these organically without recognizing or realizing that there may be a permit. My concern is for people that may be grandfathered in, that we're wanting to bring them into code and make sure they're available. If someone grandfathers in an accessory dwelling unit or an addition to a house, and then it's sold, the person either moves or passes away, and the new person buys the home, but it's not, would it still be grandfathered in at the point of the building, or would the new homeowner be required to update the standards?
So if it was created illegally, if it was created when we had zoning in place and it wasn't allowed use, you would have to meet all of the standards that we adopt to be a legal ADU. There are probably ADUs out there that were created prior to us having zoning. Those would be non-conforming uses, and they could continue until they were no longer used, I think, for a year, and then it would be no longer allowed.
And then with respect to the parking requirements,
Yep.
have you at all looked at changing those based on how close they are to transit, or based on the walk score of the neighborhood? If someone's close by to shopping and transit and all these kind of things, maybe limiting the parking requirements? Or I know we've also looked at no parking requirements as well. Has that been an influence?
There was a suggestion about looking at distance to like transit stops. The challenge is that we're not in control of transit, where those stops are, how frequent those are. So to tie something to transit is a little bit troublesome for us.
Sure. And then one last question, I promise. Have we looked at possibly sunsetting this in an appropriate time to make sure that we have enough code compliance oversight to be able to look at it? I know the expected use is that there won't be that many, just on the off chance that there's everybody in Salem wants one, that we would have a chance to reevaluate it in a couple of years. Is that standard with something this major to a code change?
Yeah, most communities actually do revisit their ADU standards to address concerns usually. So we haven't built it in necessarily saying in like 3 years we'll come back, but that's pretty common practice. Most of the communities started allowing these in like the 90s, and most of them have come back in the early 2000s or in the last 10 years to a revision or two.
And there was no restriction on the concentration of ADUs or the dispersal of them throughout the city? That wouldn't be something that you've looked at currently?
No, we tried to figure out where the existing ones were by going through the county assessors, where they have multiple dwellings on a lot. Most of them are concentrated in the inner neighborhoods around downtown, but it was hard to tell if those were actually ADUs because they're not allowed, or if they were something else that the assessors just thought could be a dwelling unit. But it did look like if they were all in the inner neighborhoods.
Thank you very much, Eunice.
Yep.
Counselor Kaiser?
Thank you. So one of the concerns I heard about this from my neighborhoods was the height. So for example, my house is probably only 19 feet tall. So if a 25-foot ADU is allowed, it would actually be considered like the primary residence. Just wondering kind of how the Planning Commission arrived at a 25-foot height and why they didn't look at perhaps a percentage of the primary residence being the height instead of that.
Well, I think they started at the 20, the whole idea of being able to do a 2-story or a unit over your garage. And I think the 25 really came from more of a design compatibility aspect of the steeper roof in older neighborhoods. There wasn't much discussion at the Planning Commission in terms of relationship to the main house and the height of the main house. I think some communities do that, but a lot of the ones that we research have a strict 18, 20, 25-foot height.
Okay, thanks.
Counselor McCoy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That was one of my questions, so I'll move on to the second one. Are manufactured homes allowed?
Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
So the same requirements and those
Yes.
kinds of things, but they are allowed?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Anderson?
That was one of my questions, so I can move on, except to say, ask, I do have a kind of a follow-up. In regular residential zoning, are manufactured homes allowed?
Yes.
So my next-door neighbor could tear down his house and build put a manufactured home there?
We do have special use standards, so they have to meet certain standards in terms of the design, but yes.
I'm interested in, one of the issues that was raised by SCAN was, gee, what about if we have somebody who builds an ADU and then rents out the original dwelling and the ADU?
Right.
So their point, I think, was that then becomes a multifamily home, multifamily dwelling, or dwelling's not a single-family home. What's your response to that?
You mean the owner occupancy?
Yeah.
So
I guess you said it better than I did. Thanks, Eunice.
I just want to make sure I understood.
Yeah.
So we did consider owner occupancy. There are a few reasons we didn't recommend it. One, we obviously don't require owner occupancy right now for a single family, a duplex or triplex, anything. It would be a new concept.
Okay.
But also, the communities that have had them, when we called them to do research, like Eugene, have had a lot of difficulty enforcing that. So while they require it on the books, it's not necessarily followed. Thirdly, the financing is more difficult when you can't, when you require one person to live there, because these are somewhat expensive to build. Being able to rent both of them out apparently helps with the financing as well. So there's several reasons we looked at that.
And did Eugene indicate that, with respect to enforcement, that there was a lot of concern about enforcement, or was it not really that much of a big deal to them?
It was a concern around the university.
Okay, yeah.
Yes.
So that's a unique set of circumstances that we are
Yes.
thankful we don't have.
Right.
Our university is a good size compared to the city. Then my final question is, there was an interesting discussion from one of the members of the public, I think it was Mr. Slater, about tree coverage and what's going to happen if somebody takes down a big tree to build an ADU and how that's going to affect the tree coverage. I guess I'd like a specific response, but then also, we don't have any people, with the exception for white oaks, I think, and it may not even be all white oaks, but people can take down a tree in their, at their private property anytime they want.
Only so many per year.
Yeah.
Right, so our tree conservation, our preservation code would apply regardless of if you're building an ADU in your backyard, a shed, a garage, in addition to your house, all those standards would apply still.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Cook?
I just lost it with the tree comment. I'm sorry. What was the comment before, Counselor Anderson?
The comment by a member of the public was, you should require somebody to, if
Oh.
they take down a tree, replace a tree because of the concern about tree coverage. And what I understand is that the same sort of rules and regulations that apply now to taking down trees will still apply to the ADUs.
Thank you. Sorry. So in relation to the statement you said about not having to live in either the
Right.
primary residence
Right.
or the ADU.
Right.
So if I'm following you correctly, if the goal is to keep up with the state requirement to have a certain amount of housing stock, we're inviting people that wouldn't normally be able to be landlords in a more affordable way. Is that right? So someone who doesn't traditionally go out and rent to people would have the flexibility to be able
Oh,
to
right.
rent to someone to be a landlord?
Right, and.
So, sorry, just to piggyback on the question, are you going to require that they go through landlord training? Because sometimes not require would be a bad word. Have you looked at how to educate the population of potential new landlords to make sure that we're not creating a situation that would be troublesome for both landlord and renter?
We could certainly point people to resources, whether it's on our project website or information that we give out to the public. And I should have said earlier, and I apologize for forgetting, that there is a lot of research on owner occupancy, and the communities that don't require it, like Portland, Ashland, for example, I think it's roughly like 70%, maybe even more, end up being owner occupied. A lot of the demand for ADUs, for someone to go through the trouble of building a unit on their property, is for family members. And so the majority end up that way anyway. But the issue that I was saying earlier about, the rental, the students around the university, that's really where the issue came in other communities where they're having a difficult time enforcing.
Thank you.
Eunice, could you go back to I want to understand the square footage requirements.
Yeah.
If you do a garage with a second-story ADU, is the total square footage include the garage, or is it just for the dwelling unit?
Just for the ADU.
Just for the ADU, okay. And then I was a little confused by the continuing use of your driveway if you convert your garage. I want to understand that real clearly.
So currently, there's restrictions on where you can park on your property. And so you can park in a driveway that leads to a garage.
Right.
Once that is no longer a garage, whether it's just a living space, living room, or in the future an ADU, you can no longer park in your driveway. We're proposing that you still be allowed to park in your driveway as a legal parking spot.
Under any circumstance.
Yes, exactly.
Convert that to living space.
Right, exactly.
Okay. Great. Any other questions? Nope. Okay. Do we have any members of the public that want to comment on this one while we're on it? Jeff, did you want to? I hate to just call you out, but did you? I won't wait till the public hearing? Okay. Okay. Well, we'll wait till the public hearing then. If anyone wanted to engage the council on this during a work session, you're more than welcome to do so now. Okay. Do you have any further discussion on this? So tonight we will take this up in a public hearing. The recommendation is to move the staff recommendation forward to second reading. Okay? That's correct. Okay, great. We are adjourned then. Salem Urban Renewal Agency to order for Monday, June 26th. And we will begin with roll call.
Okay. Board Member Kaiser? Present. Board Member Anderson?
Likewise.
Board Member Nanki? Here. Board Member McCoy?
Here.
Board Member Ossick?
Here.
Board Member Hoy?
Here.
Board Member Cook?
Here.
And Board Member Lewis is absent, and Mike Evans will be filling in as guest board member counselor tonight. Chair Bennett?
Here. Okay, thank you. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I saw him do it.
Councilor McCoy, do you want to, do you have any additions or deletions to this agenda?
No, we don't.
Okay, no reports of boards and commissions. Is there anyone here who would like to speak to the Urban Renewal Agency? All righty. And the consent calendar. Go ahead. I just bet you they're empty.
I move approval of the consent calendar.
Oh, I was wrong.
See?
You're right. Okay, the Urban
I
Renewal
rescind my
Agency.
motion.
We do have public comment. Steve Anderson?
Just real quick, my name is Steve Anderson, co-chair of West Salem Neighborhood Association. Just here tonight to thank the mayor and city council members during the budget process for taking time to listen to members of the neighborhood association and the community on several of the issues. Also allowing us to speak in favor of the half-time FTE for neighborhood services, important organization that supports neighborhood actions, and also in support of services at the West Salem Library. In addition to that, at the last meeting, there was a motion to put aside the issue on Marine Drive for a period of time, and I'd like to invoke for the mayor and council a offer from the neighborhood association to work with city staff to help develop the position paper in terms of what are the facts in the matter, what are the policy issues, where there's agreement, disagreement, so that as you go into deliberation on that, staff and the people in the community have had a chance to help kind of lay out some of the issues and make it easier for this body to move forward. So that's an offer, and we would encourage that. And so that's all I wanted to do, is I say thank you and offer that there are several people in the community that would like to work with staff to make it a little easier as that goes forward. Thank Councilman McCoy for his motion last time. And that's all I have. Any questions? But just a big thank you to everyone.
Councilor Anderson?
Yes, thank you for coming down, Steve. I assume that you would also like your testimony to be adopted as part of the public testimony in the city council meeting, which we will be having next.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
That's fine. I think that's what I signed up for, but
No, you actually signed up for the Urban Renewal Agency, and we appreciate it. 'Cause
Excuse me
we didn't
for,
have anyone else signed up.
Yeah,
Steve.
we,
For-
Well, we do have one other.
all right. But
We'll find
big
out if
thing
they
is
want
the
to be
community
there, too.
appreciates the time that everyone has taken on the council to listen to the community and make extra time
And we
available.
appreciate it too. I just wanted to make sure that this could get into
Yeah.
the council meeting as well as the urban renewal.
Thank you.
So
Yes,
thank you, Mayor.
We will take it, you make that offer both to the Urban Renewal Agency, the City Council, and particularly to Mr. Fernandez to get in touch with you.
Yeah, we'd like to work
Thank you
with
very
Peter
much.
and help in that whole process to
Right.
kind of get a good
Okay.
position paper for this body to start with instead of starting from scratch.
Thanks, Steve.
All right.
Evan Osborne. Do you want to speak, Evan?
Yeah, he's on the wrong agenda.
Okay, Evan, you want to wait till the council? Okay. All righty. Councilor McCoy?
I move approval of the consent calendar.
You want to go over that real slowly?
Very slowly. Okay. Under resolutions, we have a motion or a resolution to adopt the fiscal year 2017-18 Urban Renewal Agency of the City of Salem budget. We have then 3 items authorizing, 42B, authorizing the short-term borrowing for the North Gateway Urban Renewal Area. 42C is authorizing short-term borrowing for the Mill Creek Urban Renewal Area. 42D is authorizing the short-term borrowing for the Riverfront Downtown Urban Renewal Area. And under action items, we have reappointments to the West Salem Redevelopment Advisory Board. All those folks are, all the current members are being reappointed for another term.
All right, any discussion? Everyone understands that short-term borrowing? Okay, great. All right, all those in favor of the motion? Who's the second on that? Nanki, you got him? Okay. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. We have,
That's it.
Ms. Rutherford, do you want to talk to us about anything in particular?
I have nothing to share right now.
Okay.
I have comments I'll make on the council agenda, though.
I'm sorry?
I have comments on, sorry. I have comments I'll make on the council agenda later.
Great. Join that list. Okay, great. Well then, no further business. The Urban Renewal Agency is adjourned.
That was quick. Keep it up. Keep it up.
Hope they're all watching. I'm going to call to order the City Council meeting for Monday, June 26th. And if the recorder would please call the roll.
Counselor Kaiser? Present. Counselor Anderson? Present. Counselor Nanki? Here. Counselor McCoy?
Here.
Counselor Osick?
Here.
Counselor Hoy?
Here.
Counselor Cook?
Here.
Counselor Lewis is absent, and Mayor Bennett.
Here. Okay, let's see, we have additions, deletions, revisions.
I move we approve the revisions to the agenda.
Second.
Second by Osick. You want to go over those?
And that is a revised staff report with attachment for 32C, which is the calls for the adoption of the 17-18 City of Salem budget.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Any comments from city councilors? Councilor McCoy?
Well, I had the pleasure of filling in for you, as you were, by the way, Mayor Bennett was up at Spokane helping celebrate his father's 97th birthday.
Wow.
He's on the 110-year plan right now.
That's right. I told him to take care of himself. He has good genes there in that family. So, but I got to fill in for him opening World Beat on Saturday morning, which is great fun. Watch the children's parade come in and fill the amphitheater and say a few words along with former Mayor Mike Swaim. I didn't know this, but on the 20th, this is the 20th anniversary of the World Beat. It was the first event in the Riverfront Park on the day Riverfront Park opened. So they're linked together in history moving forward here. But it was a great day. It's too bad it was a little too hot there for folks. I came down later on to watch a concert, and it was 101 degrees when we got out of the car, and it was so hot you couldn't sit on the concrete curbs in the amphitheater. It was too hot. You had to go find some shade somewhere and cower in it while you listened to those the women doing a great concert. But it was well attended in the evenings all 3 nights, so I think in all great success, certainly something Salem can be proud of. And thanks, Mr. Mayor, for allowing me to fill in for you.
Certainly. Councilor Cook?
I just wanted to say thank you today at the Gilbert House. They had their summer block party event where they had free admission for all of the kids from 10 to 2 today. I was there, hence the flair. But it was really fun, and it was a great chance to see all of the teams that come together and partners, and what a valuable resource the Gilbert House is as one of our facilities in town. Also, I found out about the Summer Reading Club, which is open now at the library for kids and adults, and you can sign up online and complete your reading logs and be entered for really cool prizes.
Great, thank you. Councilor Anderson.
Thank you. I have a few things to talk about, but I want to preface them all by saying Salem is a terrific place to live, and we've just heard some of those things, and I want to comment on 3 or 4 things that have happened since the last council meeting. The first one is that we have a sister city in Salem, India, and we were pleased to have 2 members from that city come and visit us a week and a half ago, and we think we showed them everything that Salem has to offer, including things at City Hall. They came to a reception and dinner at former Mayor Peterson's house, and she's been very instrumental in this relation. They came to a tea at my wife Jessica's and my house. They were at Rotary. I even heard they made it over to Grand Ron to
Casino.
see what's there. So that's one thing in the sister city. The other is the World Beat, which Councilor McCoy already talked about, but that's just another thing of how we show that we are, in fact, an inclusive city, which goes with the resolution we passed, I don't know, 2 months ago maybe now. Then also, I want to again say what a terrific time was had by all at Salem Make Music Day on the first day of summer, and it was well attended and terrific bands of all kinds, from kids playing orchestra to hip hop to any kind of music you want, which was terrific. And then finally, as part of, again, as the part of the multicultural city we are becoming, my wife and I were fortunate enough to attend 3 out of 4 days of a Sikh wedding that was here at Deepwood one night, at the Sikh temple for the ceremony, and then at one of the wineries outside for the dinner after the wedding. And it was terrific, and it was wonderful to see people of all types here in Salem, and I know this will just get more exciting as we move forward in this.
Very good. Any others? Councilor Kaiser.
Thank you. I think it was a couple Saturdays ago, I went to the West Salem Super Saturday at the West Salem Boys and Girls Club, and I believe I can't remember exactly how many years it's been going, but I showed up expecting it to be a fairly small event, and it was not. There were lots of tents, lots of people, lots of barbecue. It was a really great event, and I was really happy to see it. So shout out to Jess Price with Neighborhood Services and the Edgewater Partnership. It was a really great event.
Great, thank you. Councilor McCoy.
Yeah, also got to, along with Councilor Hoy, we went to a graduation for 5 new members of the fire department last Friday, and the chief and his staff did a great job getting those folks sworn in. As they walked in, I thought we saw the starting lineup for a college football team. These are big dudes walking in there, very tall, big, strong men that I think are up to the task. But as the chief said, they're all lateral transfers from other departments, so the training was a little quicker. They were on the job Monday morning, and great seeing 5 new members come on to help us with our public safety.
I had the opportunity last week to participate in the dedication of the now completely redone Capitol Plaza down on Chemeketa and 12th. For those of you who remember the building, it was pink and beige, peeling pink and beige. It no longer is. It's really been an exceptional job. Public-private partnership involving a whole range of private banking as well as development, City of Salem, State of Oregon. It redeveloped 36 units for low-income seniors, generally frail seniors. The average household income is less than $10,000 a year for the residents of the 7-story building. It's essentially based on Section 8 rental assistance. They added a second elevator that actually serves the needs of the residents. Everyone has their own heat, and for the first time, air conditioning. There's an outdoor patio. It is really a great building, a real tribute and a great addition to our affordable and low-income housing stock. So I was real pleased to participate in that. Anyone else? Okay, thank you. No proclamations, yay, no presentations, so we'll go to public comment. No proclamations. Okay, we have a number of folks signed up. You'll recall, please give your name, your ward or your address. You have 3 minutes. At 2 minutes, the light will turn yellow. As soon as that light turns red, just stop talking or I'll ask you to stop talking. Your time's up. We've got a large number of folks to get through this evening. So, Linda Walmark.
Good evening, Mayor Bennett, City Councilors. Welcome home, Mayor Bennett.
Thank you.
My name is Linda Walmark, and I live at 4734 Bradford Loop Southeast, and I am a co-coordinator of 350 Salem, Oregon, which is the local affiliate of 350 org that is an international grassroots climate change organization. I'm here tonight to urge the council to adopt a work group, to assign a work group to consider adoption of the Climate Action Plan. I read with great interest the report included in the attachments to the agenda titled Salem Activities, Natural Resources, and the Environment. And for those of you who didn't get a chance to look at it, it is a 2.5-page list of the many things that Salem does to protect our environment. And we have a lot to be proud of. There's some excellent things on here. This list, in fact, has many actions and programs that would form the core of a climate action plan. Many of these things have greenhouse gas reduction implications, or they represent a flexible, resilient response to climate impacts. But a collection of uncoordinated policies, however well-intended and effective, is not a climate action plan. It doesn't measure greenhouse gases or set reduction targets, and as far as adaptation to climate change impacts, it has holes. The first goal of a climate action plan is to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. The federal government has abdicated its responsibility in this regard. Climate change simply cannot be solved without the aggressive participation of cities worldwide. We must address our share of the responsibility. It is only fair. And it's been demonstrated in numerous cities that there are also immediate benefits that could be realized, such as lower energy costs, job creation, human health benefits, and livability improvements simply by lowering our greenhouse gas emissions. The second goal of a climate action plan is adaptation to climate change impacts. And I thought a lot about this over the weekend since I spent so much time indoors. It was too hot to go out. Fortunately, these hot spells don't go on for long in the Willamette Valley. For the past 30 years, the average Northwest resident has experienced only 5 days of 95-degree or warmer temperatures per year on average. However, if we continue as usual, projections indicate that we will experience anywhere from 12 to 20 such days by mid-century. And by 2100, Oregon will have as many 95-degree days as Texas does now. So let's just focus for a moment on Salem's plans for heat wave impacts. Heat-related deaths represent more fatalities across the United States, weather-related fatalities, than all other weather events combined. Do we have plans to address this, especially in regards to vulnerable populations, such as the elderly and the sick? Are we prepared for water shortages that take into account the magnitude of this change? And how will lower river flows affect our energy supply, dependent as it is on hydroelectric power? Can we make our buildings more energy efficient?
Linda, I'm going to have to ask you to...
Installation of solar power? I ask you to adopt a climate action plan.
Thank you very much. Representative Paul Evans. Hello. We don't want you away from the Capitol too long. There's a lot of work you've got to get done over there.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I'll be very brief today. I submitted a letter earlier today. I do not envy you the task of local government budgeting. I know every decision is difficult, but I am here to ask for a possible reconsideration on reopening the fire station in West Salem. The reason I make that case is, while I absolutely understand the importance of other priorities, I also understand where you are in the budget process. My concern is that the growth swing that I actually think will be happening in West Salem and in the greater community might be adversely affected by not having the fire station there. The way we used to staff fire departments, as you know, is much different than we do now. And my concern when I understood that 3-person engine companies for all of West Salem, when our favorite subject, the bridges are full or congested, it's one of those situations where if I was trying to convince a developer or a home builder to expand a neighborhood or come in with a business, it's one of those things that might be of a concern. Again, I'm not trying to tell you what you need to do. It's your job, but I did want to try to add my voice to try to make sure that if there is any way to reconsider it, that you actually have an opportunity to do that.
Great.
For the record, I'm Paul Evans. I represent House District 20, and I appreciate the opportunity to come and share these thoughts.
Great, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Any questions for Representative Evans? When sine die, Representative?
We're getting close.
Okay.
We're getting close.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Millie Estrin?
Good evening, Mayor Bennett and Salem City Councilors. My name is Millie Estrin, and I reside at 1230 Raphael, Kaiser, Oregon. Although I reside in Kaiser, I am very invested in Salem. I exercise at the Y, shop locally in Salem, belong to a synagogue in Salem, and attend movies, plays, and concerts in Salem. I've walked the railroad bridge, relaxed in Riverfront Park, and breathed the air in Salem. I've also paid my share of traffic tickets in Salem. My son and family live in Salem, and my grandchildren are products of Salem schools. Salem Jewish Congregation Sustainability Committee, which I chair, has received a grant from Salem City Public Works to build a bioswale on our Cunningham property to capture contaminants from our parking lot and purify rain runoff before it enters Salem's sewer system. Our committee also launched a community garden that has donated hundreds of pounds of produce to Marion Polk Food Share, which assists people in need throughout the area. So you can see that what happens in Salem truly is of great interest and concern to me. That is why I am here this evening to add my voice to others calling for the creation of a Salem Climate Action Plan. Salem and our local intergovernmental partners have much to be proud of, such as Salem's wonderful sustainability program of garbage collection, Earthwise certification, and more, provided through the auspices of Marion Polk Public Works. However, you need to systematically examine your policies and procedures to ensure that you have built the most robust and resilient structure to meet the increasing and accelerating challenges posed by climate change. I also think that we all should do what we can to reduce our carbon emissions. The overwhelming evidence that I have seen in my almost 93 years of global warming compelled me to try and bring our congregation to sustainability. I feel it is my responsibility as a Jew to guard the earth as it is commanded in our Torah. Portland, Eugene, Corvallis, Beaverton, and
Millie,
other
the time-
cities are...
The light's on, I'm sorry. So thank you very much. Janet Lorenzen.
Mayor Bennett and Salem City Councilors, I'm Professor Janet Lorenzen. I live in Sally Cook's district. So I'm here to urge you to hold a working group on the Climate Action Plan. Essentially, I think we need more time to think through what a climate action plan with an equity lens would look like for Salem. So necessary parts of it would include, first, coordinating a greenhouse gas inventory, a baseline metric that would help us clarify opportunities for action or low-hanging fruit like energy efficiency, and pinpoint equity problems like air quality along the I-5 corridor. Willamette University just finished our campus greenhouse gas inventory, and we would be happy to help. Second, the working group could begin by identifying short and long-term synergies or win-win projects that reduce greenhouse gases while also fulfilling other city priorities that have already been established. So, for example, the state transportation package has a provision in it for a payroll tax to support local transit. And if that mechanism becomes available to Salem, we could soon see an expansion of the bus system. Expanding transit has multiple benefits, right? Access, equity, mobility, economics, health. It also reduces greenhouse gases. But if we don't first have a baseline established, then we can't actually talk about what those environmental benefits are. In addition, low-income housing with energy efficiency measures would reduce utility costs as well as using less fossil fuels. Or when we add sidewalks and bike lanes to Salem or make school zones into non-idling zones, we could not only measure outcomes in terms of safety or miles of bike lanes constructed, but also measure benefits in terms of air quality and reductions in emissions. Similarly, a green business incubator fits with economic goals that have already been established. So ultimately, a climate action plan would include its own projects like cooling centers for heat waves and other resiliency plans, but also it would be a kind of meta goal to help coordinate and guide other goals. It would also measure benefits more thoroughly and remind us to use both a sustainability lens and an equity lens when we actualize projects in order to create win-win situations. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to give you an example. I thought you raised several interesting points. One, I saw in this building I mentioned over on Chemeketa and 12th, in that building, 7-story building, it had a 100-gallon hot water tank downstairs. So it took 15 to 20 minutes to get water running out up on the 7th floor that was hot. And untold gallons over the past, I'm familiar with that building for the past almost 50 years, has run through that. They changed that and gave each of the units their own hot water heaters, so they're going to see tremendous savings in their water bill, which is second only to parking tickets for cost in town.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Heating water is one of those hidden costs that most people never think about.
Yeah, I just thought it was quite interesting that that had not been thought of 50 years ago, so thank you for bringing it up tonight. I thought it was interesting. Yes, Councilor Anderson.
Thank you for coming, Professor. Could you explain briefly the what Willamette University is doing in this area? You talked about their program.
Absolutely. So Joe Abraham, the head of the Sustainability Institute, couldn't be here tonight. He's on vacation in Canada. But he has worked with Willamette undergraduate students as well as Willamette law students. And they've put together basically a kind of greenhouse gas inventory of what the campus's carbon footprint is. And they've worked on it for a couple of years, mostly because they want to teach the students how to do it and then have the students do them. I think for the city, it would take about a year. So.
Well, thank you very much. It was very helpful. Liz Gill.
Mayor Bennett, City Council members, thank you for having me here today. Although there is a minority of young people in the audience today, I'm here to ask the Council to objectively consider the positive long-term benefits of adopting a climate action plan and starting a working group very soon. So I think there's misconceptions around the fact that economic growth, climate action, and resiliency are not mutually exclusive concepts. So a plan to address climate change that is really specific to Salem and the problems and opportunities that we have here to reduce our greenhouse gas footprint can lead to long-term economic growth and really create opportunities for young people like me to stay in a place like Salem rather than moving to a place like Portland or Eugene. It can stimulate good jobs, local green energy, green construction, like Professor Lorenzen was saying, really updating our buildings and making Salem work more efficiently. And then efficient and accessible transportation. I would have loved to use public transportation to get to school, things like that, but it's really actually quite hard to access in Salem in a lot of areas. And so
Yeah, that was kind.
I truly believe that climate action plans and the roles that cities have to play are really unique opportunities for cities to identify the problems that we have here and really run with those problems rather than adopting the exact same plan as Portland. So we can really make this about Salem and creating a better Salem. So just to wrap up, cities are really leading the way to do this, and I really hope that Salem will join that movement. So, thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Any questions? Thank you. Catalina Dionis.
Good evening. I'm Catalina Dionis, and I live by Candelaria Elementary School. And I'm a professor of civic communication and media at Willamette University, and my research focuses on climate justice communication and constraints that bar more sustainable community engagement. And as I was reading through the strategic plan rationale online, I was struck by some of the language talking about developing a transition plan for the city based on anticipated changes. And given that language, it seems both logical and good sense to incorporate some kind of climate action plan within this larger strategic plan. It's also the moral thing to do, especially as we think about the United States withdrawing from the Paris Climate Accord and the imperative of municipal and state actors to take the lead then on all that's at stake in terms of our community and our planet. And I think that focusing specifically on climate creates additional opportunities for building a more sustainable Salem in addition to the other important strategic plan items that have been discussed. Along with climate action, climate justice must be foregrounded in this planning process, as climate disruption, heat waves, droughts, some of the other more extreme weather events that have been discussed at the local and global level are inevitable and already are being experienced unevenly by frontline communities, namely people of color and low-income individuals who are facing the cruel irony of climate change, where they contribute the least and yet have to grapple with the greatest consequences. Also, by climate, as we think about that term, it's important to approach it broadly beyond the atmosphere and greenhouse gases, to include the many spaces in which we interact and that shape life in Salem. Addressing these different communication climates is essential for cultivating spaces for just, sustainable deliberation and decision-making practices. And so I'm going to be operating under the assumption that there will be a climate action plan that's adopted for Salem and that's implemented quickly, because again, it's the moral thing to do. And I ask that as that's being done, that 3 items guide the plan's development and implementation, not only including but foregrounding the needs and concerns of communities of color and low-income community members, being inclusive of cultural difference, including language ability, since limiting communication to English only and to convoluted language silences different perspectives. And I also ask that the plan include the perspectives and integration of our city's young people who represent the generations most impacted by climate change. And this yields a number of benefits, including advancing equity and social justice and creating opportunities for coalition building for a more cohesive Salem community. And from an educator's perspective, this approach encourages more student engagement and opportunities for climate change literacy, civic responsibility, and green jobs, which are vital for transitioning to a low-carbon economy. In closing, grappling with increasing environmental and climate harms also necessitates cultivating spaces for hope. Developing a just, sustainable climate action plan for Salem marks an important step forward in this effort.
Great. Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Okay, thank you. Ray Quisenberry.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. My name is Ray Quisenberry. I live at 920 5th Street Northeast. And I'm speaking tonight in favor of a climate action plan. I got my sticker and everything here. And I'm thinking about this. I was thinking about 3 ways that a climate action plan could improve quality of life for everybody here in Salem. First, I see a climate action plan saving money for homeowners. After all, you can't talk about lowering your carbon footprint without talking about improving efficiencies. And I think about my Grant neighborhood and the adjacent Highland neighborhood and the other older neighborhoods in town. When you improve efficiency, means, of course, saving money for the homeowners. And, of course, it also means creating jobs in the community, which I've done with my own home. I've created quite a few jobs. My house was built in 1920, so it's taken quite a bit of work. But these people that do the work live in the community, work for small businesses, and make good middle-class wages. So that's sort of a win-win for everybody. Secondly, I see a climate action plan as encouraging safer streets. So you have expanded and repaired sidewalks, you have improved intersections, you have safe bike lanes. So everyone from kids going to school to older people going to the market, they feel safe and they actually enjoy the experience. Right now we have cars that sort of dominate. I'd like that to be more shared, and that would be safer for everybody and improve everyone's lives. And finally, a climate action plan means a healthier Salem. And when I say that, I just don't mean things like cancer or things like lung disease, and it will improve those items as well. I'm talking about neighbor-to-neighbor engagement. There's no better way to build a community than bring neighbors together on a sidewalk or working in a community garden. In my own garden, I made friends with the lady who delivers my mail. She loves my sugar snap peas. So that's a friend I've made. So these are like three aspects of a climate action plan that I see which would improve the quality of life of everybody in the community, as I mentioned before. But we won't see this improvement if we don't have a plan. And I strongly ask that a climate action plan become a part of the goals of the city of Salem. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Any questions? All right, thank you. Bill Smaldone.
Good evening, Mayor and Councilors. My name is Bill Smaldone. I live at 430 21st Street Southeast. I'm also here to urge you to support the formation of a group that would implement a climate action plan for the city. People who preceded me, I think, outlined quite well all of the various elements that should be discussed by such a group and that should go into the plan. I would like to urge Salem to join this movement of cities nationwide that are trying to basically reverse the damage being done at the national level in terms of environmental policy. And I think that, well, what I'm hoping will happen with the climate action plan is that our implementation of such a policy will result in us recreating an environmental commission for the city. Because I think that we have to do more than simply deal with the issue of the carbon footprint of the Salem community. But we have to remember that there are many, many other aspects of the environmental crisis that we have to deal with that we've started to slip behind on. We need, in this country, to incorporate environmental thinking into all aspects of city government, just like we do when we think about having a planning commission to manage our growth. Half a century ago, when planning commissions were brought online, it made sense to bring them online because as cities grew, they realized they had to manage their growth. Now that we know that we have a gigantic environmental crisis, not just one that involves the carbon footprint, but that involves a whole range of problems that we face, we should be incorporating environmental thinking into all aspects of city policymaking. We had an environmental commission here once in the city, but the city decision makers at that time decided to dissolve it because they were thinking short term, they were not thinking long term, they were penny wise and pound foolish, and it would be to the city's great advantage if an environmental commission was reestablished that drew on the great talent available in the city, not only at our universities, but in many of our other institutions. We have lots of people here who could help the city formulate policy. It wouldn't cost that much money. And it should be incorporated, just like we incorporate the Planning Commission, into all of our policymaking. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you very much. Lori Doherty.
Good evening. My name is Laura Doherty. I live in Ward 2 in Salem, and I'm one of the coordinators of the Climate Action Organization 350 Salem, Oregon. Mayor Bennett, councilors, thank you for the opportunity to speak, and thank you for all the hard work and consideration and care that has gone into developing the Salem strategic plan. We think it needs one more thing, a climate action plan. Today, the U.S. Conference of Mayors at the 85th annual meeting, they continued with several resolutions along the path of putting cities at the forefront of climate action and climate protection and fostering the transition to a renewable energy economy. This path began long before the Trump administration, but Donald Trump makes it even more urgent and important that cities continue to take leadership on the issue of climate change. I would like to read part of one of the resolutions that was passed, because it lays out many of the advantages and values and benefits of taking strong action on climate. This one talks about 100% renewable energy. That's really not what we're talking about tonight, but like I said, it gives you a sense of what cities are thinking about along these lines. Whereas renewable energy represents an enormous economic opportunity for our nation and our nation's cities to create jobs in an emerging industry, increase economic security, expand prosperity for local residents, reduce air pollution and associated public health risks, reduce the strain on water resources, save consumers money, and address environmental justice challenges in communities. It goes on to describe what renewable energy is and what it isn't, and to talk about how wind and solar costs are coming down, that many U.S. cities are already committed to 100% renewable energy, that a more diverse and distributed energy infrastructure means energy freedom and the opportunity for equitably distributing resources, addressing poverty, stimulating new economic activity in cities, and lifting up those most impacted by high energy costs. And that the actions by local government and businesses are already a significant driver of renewable energy growth and can put the country on track to meet its commitment to the Paris Agreement. Now therefore be it resolved that the United States Conference of Mayors supports cities establishing a community-wide target of powering their communities with 100% renewable energy. Be it further resolved that the Conference of Mayors proclaims its commitment to equity, affordability, public participation, and access for all people as cities pursue this transition to clean renewable energy. Be it further resolved that priority should be given to the lowest cost measures, and it goes on to list many of those. And be it further resolved that given the economic development, job creation, and job training potential of clean renewable energy, the transition to 100% clean renewable energy should include structured mechanisms to include low-income citizens in the benefits to be derived from this transition, are including quality careers, job training, adhering to local source. Well, it goes on.
Excellent.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mary Neuendorf.
Mayor Bennett, City Council members, I appreciate the chance to be here. I can't talk quite as fast as Laurie, but I'm going to keep it short. Several people have talked eloquently and in detail about the need to be concerned about the climate and the change we're experiencing, and have made suggestions for what the city might do and what the results might be of a climate action plan. I would just like to add that I think there's a temptation to say, well, we're all well-intended. We have similar goals for not having the Earth warm many degrees more, but we can incorporate that as we go along. And I think that's a real danger. I think in that way, sure, everybody's on board. We want to do good things for the environment, but unless we have a plan that guides the city, I think one can easily go astray with that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Carolyn O'Brien.
Mayor Bennett, City Councilors, my name is Carolyn O'Brien. I live in Kaiser, 1692 Carroller Court Northeast. Salem and Kaiser, though, have a lot of things in common: public transit, public schools, waste management. The biggest one is climate. We all share the same climate. We breathe the same air. There's no longer any room for dismissing climate change. It's here. It's happening. We're responsible for it. It's our responsibility. The heat wave occurring right now will become more frequent, and it'll be followed by devastating, crippling winters. We have to do something to mitigate this. The destruction to crops, water reserves, jobs, our health, our economy will be unmanageable. Plant, animal, human, every life will be at risk. I've worked as a nurse in healthcare for 37 years, and the effects of climate change on the population will be those of nightmares. Mayor Bennett, you and I spoke about the homeless population. They will suffer unbelievably. I love being a nurse. Some days it's hard. The United States Conference of Mayors is something that you belong to. This document is an outstanding statement on the many commitments of the mayor's office. The one thing I read that I appreciated the most is that there's a commitment to supporting a cities-driven plan to reverse climate change, and that a survey finds that U.S. mayors are taking action on climate protection and planning for more. There is much in that commitment, and I appreciate your willingness to tackle all of this. Without a specific goal, though, to measure, it's going to be difficult. I'm reminded of a book I read a long time ago. The title was, "If you don't know where you're going, you'll probably end up somewhere else." I still have that book. I shared it with my son, who thought it was hysterical. But it means if you don't have a goal, if you don't decide what that goal is and have a clear path to it, you're going to stray off. We have to, so I propose the main thing is actually within this is a climate action plan. Well, everybody in the audience who wants a climate action plan, will you stand up really quick? I still have a couple seconds. Thank you for letting me speak, even though I live in Kaiser.
That's okay. You pay parking tickets too. Kind of an honorary citizen when you do that. Evan Osborne.
Hello, Mayor Bennett, City Council. Thanks for letting me speak once again to the City Council. For those that don't know me, my name is Evan Osborne, and I reside in Ward 3. I'm here as a representative of Osborne Adventures to testify in favor of Urban Renewal's proposal to supply funding towards cycle share stations within the downtown Urban Renewal jurisdiction. I've had the pleasure of collaborating with our Urban Renewal administration, and I look forward to aligning with our mission to improve the quality and livability of our city. Before I address the details behind the funding amount proposed, I would like to correct an item within the proposal for public record. On page 2 of the legislation details document, the second to last paragraph states, stations will include a kiosk with information panel that can be used to provide maps, information about the system, and advertising. Please strike out the term advertising and replace with logo indicators. No advertisements are to be used on our equipment. Regarding the proposal amount of $3,000, this is the amount needed to initiate installation of 6 stations. This $3,000 does not take into consideration any other expenditures, which may include, but is not limited to, the need to install new infrastructure to host the stations, or any permit fees such as right-of-ways and property easements. The $500 per station just covers the hardware and manpower from the vendor utilized in the installation process. In summary, for each station installed, Osborne Adventures is responsible for $8,000 to initiate the install per station. Urban Renewal has proposed to cover the hardware and vendor's labor, comprising 6% of the costs needed to activate an individual station. This is very much appreciated and budgetary, and every little amount of funding counts. However, budgetary restrictions are causing us to fall short of funding a station at the bus terminal. Any funds that come in at this time that are not needed in the installation of other stations are being directed towards this future bus terminal station. If the City Council approves of the $3,000, we would like assistance in unforeseen installation, pending infrastructure construction, and permits to help with getting a station by the bus terminal, which will be very beneficial to our community. Thank you for your time and consideration of this proposal. We look forward to delivering a successful cycle share program which will make a positive impact within our community. That's
Thank
all I
you,
have.
Evan. Councilor Anderson.
Thanks for coming down, Evan. I'd be interested if you could talk a little more about the, I hate to use this word, but I will, synergistic effect of putting a bicycle station at the bus station.
Very good question. I, as a resident of Salem, I lived out south a number of years, have been kind of restricted from riding the bus because the idea of coming downtown on the bus requires you to hoof it, in essence, wherever you go. It takes 10 minutes alone just to walk to our new beautiful pedestrian bridge from the terminal. Add another 10 minutes round trip, that's 20 minutes just to walk from the bus terminal. If you were to run errands in the downtown area walking around, that's a substantial amount or investment of time. Allowing a bus or a station, bike station terminal down by the bus terminal would allow increased mobility to bus riders and users of the Chariot system, which would benefit Chariots and the city and community in general.
Great. Any further? Yes, Councilor Cook.
Thanks for coming down tonight, Evan. I just have a question about the placement of the stations. And it sounds like with the bus stop in particular, with the transit mall, you're looking at groups of people, clusters of people. What about bike-friendly roads or access to what the 65% of the cyclists that aren't in the spandex necessarily, the everyday people that would want to cycle? How are you looking at those transit areas and placement of the stations?
So as opposed to at the bus terminal, you want other sites that are kind of more applicable to the new paths that have been installed downtown. Is that what you're indicating?
I'm just looking at where you would be able to go in relationship to traffic patterns and seeing if most people would feel comfortable biking in those places and how you've taken that into consideration with this.
Well, this program alone is an educational feature. As we grow, it will help us do tests of change to determine where the users utilize it more frequently.
So you can move the stations, is what you're saying?
We can move the stations. We have administrative software that shows the usage of the stations, whether they're hot or cold. If they're cold, we can go out and educate the community about the stations. If that doesn't work, we can actually uproot the stations and move them where we feel they'll be more utilized.
Thank you.
Councilor Hoy.
What's your timeline for installing your first station?
Good question. We are aligned with a 30-day install within the negotiations if the funding that we have acquired pleases the vendor, in essence. We had set a goal of $80,000 to be submitted by the end of the month due to some unforeseen budgetary restrictions, including one of the grants not aligning with us. We're falling short of that, but we have enough to launch a minimum size of a program. And if the vendor agrees with the amount that we give them, we qualify for a 30-day turnaround, which would align us with a launch before the eclipse, August 21st. So early August is what we're looking at right now.
Thank you.
Great. Well, good luck and thank you for coming down.
Thank you.
That's everyone who's signed up. Sandra, did you want to, why don't you come? Yeah.
Good evening, Mayor Bennett and councillors. Thank you for letting me speak. A total change of direction. I'm here to express the, I'm Sandra Bennett, Ward 2, Salem Art Association, Sandra Bennett.
Okay, thanks.
I'm here to express the concerns of our 9 cultural facilities, specifically about the TOT fund, part of the city budget, which is to be approved this evening. We see a drift in the direction and interpretation of the TOT that's reducing support for Salem's cultural infrastructure. The TOT income to the cultural facilities has been diminished by 2 factors. Firstly, a flat pool, which by inflation is worth less each year. In recent years, there have been substantial increases in the tourism tax revenue. But while the city and Travel Salem have benefited, the allocations to the cultural facilities have been flat. There have been changes in the rules. For example, allocations to for-profits and sporting events that were otherwise successfully self-sustaining. Yet it is well established that cultural tourism is the most productive in the long term, and we should be working to bolster and grow the sector. It generates the greatest return as cultural tourists stay longer at their destinations and spend more on local services and products. There's a huge amount of material out there that tracks the benefits of cultural tourism. We should be researching on how we can systematically take more advantage of all that Salem has as a cultural destination. But the impact of Salem's facilities goes beyond tourism. A city's cultural facilities are major economic drivers because livability is a crucial factor when businesses consider where to locate. Businesses know they need a certain quality of cultural life in order to attract top talent they need in management positions. Cultural organizations contribute to a healthy economy by incentivizing the city as a vibrant location and for businesses. And of course, we all value a great business sector. Salem is fortunate to have a strong network of 9 facilities. They are the backbone of cultural life in the city. They focus on community building and prosperity. However, in this current budget under consideration tonight, the 9 organizations are collectively receiving only 5% of the TOT expense budget. That's approximately 0.6% each. Therefore, going forward, we respectfully request consideration of a facilities allocation based on a percentage of the total, similar to the way funds are allocated to Travel Salem. In this way, facilities can also benefit from the increases generated by the fruits of their endeavors. Many cultural nonprofits in Salem are struggling to maintain services. In recent times, we have seen some even close their doors forever.
Sorry, Sandra, time's up.
Okay. Well, thank you for your time
But
this evening.
I want to have the city manager speak to this. We talked about this during the budget cycle, so if you would.
Yes, as a result of the discussion that occurred during the Budget Committee deliberations, I am preparing a recommendation for council consideration, and I will have that for you for your July 24th council meeting. And I believe it will address the concerns that are being expressed tonight by Sandra.
Right.
Okay,
Well, thank you. On behalf of the 9 facilities, we thank you for your time.
certainly, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, anyone else? Yes? Not you, Evan. This lady's first, then you. Evan, just sec. Oh, sorry, she got her hand up first. If you'd introduce yourself and your ward.
Honorable Mayor Bennett and members of the Salem City Council, my name is Cindy Burgess. I live in Ward 4. I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of Marion and Polk Counties. And I am here to speak about the climate change action agenda. And first of all, I'd like to apologize for my letter because I didn't thoroughly research that you had already signed on as a climate change mayor. And the League is very pleased about that. And we are very concerned about it. Our National League president said on the day that Donald Trump made his announcement about withdrawing from the Paris Climate Agreement that this was a giant step in the wrong direction for the health of the planet and all living beings. It will undermine global cooperation and have harmful impact on U.S. relations with all our most trusted world allies. The long-term effects of this decision will make more people sick, especially children and the elderly. The League of Women Voters is gravely disappointed to see the United States on the wrong side of history in the fight to protect our planet. I won't go on into all of it. I'm sure you've heard a lot of this already. But I'd urge you to look into the amicus brief on the 21 youth plaintiffs, Our Children's Trust, that Mary Christina Wood, a law professor at the University of Oregon, has written a book about. And the idea that governments owe the children the protection of making adaptations. It's probably too late to change the climate change that's happened, but to make adaptations to mitigate the the devastation. We'll have a lot of climate refugees, we'll have droughts, we'll have floods, all kinds of awful things that will happen. And so thank you for being a part of that mayor's climate change group, and we thank you for considering adding it to your strategic plan.
Great. Thank you very much. Anyone else? Oh, Evan. Evan, I'm sorry.
Good evening. I'm Evan White, and I live in Ward 7, and I'm here to speak very briefly about a much smaller problem. Like many other cities, the Salem sign code prohibits lawn signs in the public right-of-way. In a case involving Los Angeles, the U.S. Supreme Court explained that the visual assault on the citizens presented by an accumulation of signs posted on public property constitutes a significant substantive evil. The city's interest in attempting to preserve or improve the quality of urban life is one that must be accorded high respect. Problem is here in Salem, due to funding limits, currently there is no enforcement of this part of our sign code. The people who place illegal signs in the right-of-way probably are not aware that they are breaking the law and potentially subject to civil penalties of up to $2,000 per day per violation. Everyone, businesses, nonprofits, and political candidates should all follow the rules. Several weeks ago, I counted 24 illegally placed signs at 2 intersections along Kubler Boulevard. The furniture store right across the street from City Hall has 7 illegal signs in the public right-of-way. Check it out tonight when you go home. Sometimes families, businesses, or nonprofits adopt a street and pick up litter and trash to improve the appearance of our city. I propose a similar public-private partnership called the, quote, Salem Sign Sweepers, unquote. These volunteers would be overseen by city staff and wear yellow safety vests while gathering up the illegally placed signs and taking them to the city shop. The sign sweepers would then attempt to contact the owners of the illegal signs, telling them where they can collect their signs after payment of an appropriate fine as determined by city staff. I'm willing to be a Salem sign sweeper, and I know quite a few others who would be happy to join me. Let's all work together to make Salem even more beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you, Evan, very much. You want to speak too? Okay.
But I will be very, very brief. I just wanted to make one observation. Since the Salem Strategic Plan Initiative began,
Mike,
I've been following...
Your name?
Mike Slater, Ward 7.
Mike.
Thank you. I'm trying to get this over fast.
Which do you live? Which ward?
I just wanted to make...
Ward 7.
Ward 7.
Ward 7 wanted to make one observation, and that is that the city set a value for compassion, which is that it is fair, equitable, and safe. And I wanted to note that in the time that I have been following the Salem Strategic Initiative very closely, from attending open houses to reading documents to attending some of the work groups, that I have not seen a lot of participation by Latinos and the Marshallese community. And I simply want to flag for the city, now that we are probably halfway or more through the process, that perhaps it's time to make some additional outreach to those communities so that when we get to the end of the process, we have a plan that the entire community can embrace rather than simply experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, great. We'll go to the consent calendar. Councilor McCoy.
Mr. Mayor, I move approval of the consent calendar with the following polls. Item 3.2D by Councilor Anderson and 3.3B by Councilor Anderson.
Okay. Second is...
Second, somebody?
Second.
You did. Okay, Anderson seconds. Hey, you want to go through those?
Okay, we'll go through these. We've got quite a few. Under resolution, well, first we have approval of the June 12th, 2017 council minutes. Under resolutions, we've got adopting the fiscal year 2017-18 budget and setting the parking tax for the downtown parking district. 3.2B is a resolution to receive state shared revenues. We have to do this and enumerate where the municipal services are going to be funded by these revenues. We've got adoption of the fiscal year 2017-18 City of Salem, Oregon budget, which is $559,799,600. We have got 3.2E, transfer of fiscal year 2016-17 budget appropriations, and this has to do with moving monies from this fiscal year to the next fiscal year for projects that have been funded but maybe not started, and or have been started but have not been completed. So moving the monies into the proper year where they're going to be done. Under action items 3.3A, we have the reappointment of John Weiner as municipal judge pro tem for another 2-year term. He currently serves in that office. 3.3C, we have adoption of the capital improvement plan for the fiscal years 2018 through 2022. 3.3D, we have an intergovernmental agreement with the ODOT for the underwater inspection of the Guerin Island Bridge. This is the bridge that goes to our water treatment plant on the Santiam River, and there's some evidence that there might be some scouring going on the supports of that bridge. We got to get down there and see if that's true or not, and take action if it is, because it's the only access to the treatment plant. 3.3E, intergovernmental agreement with the Salem Area Mass Transit District for police services at the Downtown Transit Center during the next fiscal year and fiscal year 2018 and 19. 3.3F, intergovernmental agreement with Polk County for the Mobile Crisis Response Team, something we funded for the first time last year, and we're going to refund that. 3.3G, amendment to the intergovernmental agreement with Chemeketa Community College for cooperative regional library services. And 3.3H, intergovernmental agreement with Marion County for communication and dispatch services for the 2017 St. Paul Rodeo. 3.3I, we are going to extend one more time our cable television franchise agreement with Comcast till October 1st of this year. We're busy still negotiating.
Last time.
Again, last time again. As you can tell, if you're sitting here in the crowd, there's a number of extensions here over a number of years to get to this point. 3.3J, we have some appointments to the Salem Budget Committee and other committees there. 3.3K is the collecting of bargaining agreement with the City Attorney's Collective Bargaining Unit, the Salem City Attorney's Collective Bargaining Unit, which with the worst document in history, Scab U, for July 1st, 17th through June 20th, 30th, 2020. And that is the consent calendar.
Well, that's quite a bit. Any discussion of it? Yes.
Great. Could I make just a comment on 3.3C on the capital improvement plan? One of the things that I noticed as I reviewed that was that the streets budget over the next 5 years has $62 million in it, and that there are actually 0 of those dollars that are designated for Ward 8. And as you know, Councilor Lewis and I talked about that fact, neither of us was really concerned with that, other than the big, it looked like a lot of dollars and, a lot of tax dollars that come from Ward 8, but 0 of them going, back into a project there, which really is not a problem in that, the city is one city and we view it that way. But just wanted to point it out as, as something that as we look at future projects that come up, that be something that everybody kind of sees that way as well. That, as things like possibly a bridge comes up in the future, that there might be that view of it, that it's not, a West Salem problem. So just a comment on that.
Thank you. Is that right, Mr. Fernandez? Not a dime going to West Salem? Ward 8. Oh, I'm sorry, Ward 8.
So, Peter Fernandez, Public Works Director. Yeah, those are the vagaries of the CIP.
Yeah.
As the Streets and Bridges bond is coming to an end, certainly West Salem benefited from a lot of projects and will benefit in the future from a lot of projects. But right, as projects become, until we get the next large infusion of cash, that can happen. In this case, that's the case.
Great. Thank you. Councilor Cook?
Director Fernandez, sorry, one more time. I know we talked about this previously, but Ward 7 didn't have any projects last year.
Ward 7 had, in the Streets and Bridges bond measure, Ward 7 had one project, which was Skyline. It was added at the last minute by Councilor DeHart at the time because the bond projects had been proposed without a project in Ward 7. But there's another area where we recognize a lot of needs, and in fact, the transportation needs in our community are endless in every ward. So we certainly, as Public Works Director, I look forward to the next Streets and Bridges bond measure, and I encourage the council to make it very large so that every ward can have many projects. So
Well, thank you, Mr. Fernandez. Just don't put that sign in the right-of-way.
So I agree with Mr. White. So yeah, savings projects then have added. There were additional projects in response to Councilor Nanke's comment. Savings projects were added at Ward 7. In fact, some of those projects will be done this summer. So money is always spread around, but yeah, there could be 5-year increments, especially when money's light, where there could be areas of town that are not funded for any number of reasons.
Okay, great. Any further discussion, Councilor Anderson?
Thank you. Just one question, and thank you, Director Fernandez, for the Winter Street Bridge, which was in my ward. I just want to make sure that the motion made by Councilor McCoy at last meeting about the Marine Drive put-off is included in the budget, or will not. There's no spending for that in the budget. It's in the budget, but we're not spending it until we have further.
That was the motion, wasn't it?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
just want to make
we
sure.
all voted for it, except Lewis.
And that is your city manager's understanding.
Okay.
Okay. Do you need a memo?
No.
Oh, gosh, he's got Karen.
This corner of the
Right. Okay. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Okay, we'll go to public. No, we'll go to public hearings.
Right. The City Council will now hold a continued public hearing for the purpose of receiving public testimony to amend the Salem Revised Code to allow and establish standards for accessory dwelling units in all residential zones, most commercial and industrial zones, and the neighborhood center mixed-use zone.
Okay. Thank you. And we have a staff presentation then?
We don't have a staff report tonight. We just want to enter the staff report into the record following the work session.
Okay, thank you very much. I have, I have 2 people signed up, so I'm going to go ahead. Jeff Schumacher.
So Jeff Schumacher, the chair of SCAN, live at 1945 West Nob Hill. So I guess we'd like to start out and say that we really appreciated the staff's effort on this issue. They did a lot of outreach, met with neighborhood associations, had open houses, and we thought their staff report was very comprehensive. It covered a lot of issues. It matched up with a lot of the issues that we had, matched up with some of the points of emphasis that we had put into our comments. Real quickly, the places where it matched up were generally on the size limit of 75% or 900 square feet. We think that's reasonable and appropriate. And prohibiting the short-term rentals, we agree with that. As city staff had mentioned, that these ADUs are intended to help with housing stock, not not for short-term rentals. A couple other areas where they matched up were just on the setbacks and also, like the lot coverage maximums, and also that they're charging system development charges. We think that's the right thing to do. The last place where the staff report matched up with SCAN's interests are the off-street parking. And that off-street parking issue was not just a SCAN issue that was raised by several of the neighborhood associations, as well as public input that was referenced in the staff report. And we think that's, we think it's a valid concern. I mean, I agree with what guest Councilor Evans said, where I view the city as a whole, and I understand that a lot of Salem neighborhoods have plenty of parking. But one of the issues that we hear all the time at SCAN is lack of parking. And it would be nice if the staff or somebody could, I'm not sure I have the solution, but if they could come up with a way to require one parking space, one off-street parking space for an ADU, but have a process where that can be waived without making it overly bureaucratic. That might be impossible, but it would certainly be nice for our neighborhood, and I know some other, closer in neighborhoods would appreciate that. And it doesn't sound like it would be too much of a burden if they could put some kind of a waiver process in place. That might be a reasonable compromise. The last comment I'll make is, and we raised this in our comments to city staff back in January, is just that we view the priority of ADUs as well below the rezoning land for multifamily. We think that ADUs are a good thing generally, but I also think they have limited utility when you're trying to address a housing shortage. And so with that in mind, I think it's okay for the city to take a somewhat conservative approach and to put in, tying it back in with my point about the parking, keep the bar high, make them have a parking space, an off-street parking space. And, in a few years, if that's not necessary, it can be revised. But given that I think ADUs are not a great solution, they're just one small tool available to the city. They're not the best solution to solve a housing shortage. I think that having that parking space required is reasonable. And that's all I've got. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
If I had a couple, I know Councilor Cook has questions as well. On the parking issue, one of the issues raised in the staff report, I don't know if you heard it, was that you require off-street parking, you may end up with curb cuts that eliminate on-street parking, and
Right.
you've defeated the purpose. Does that?
And that makes sense. It's totally
Okay.
reasonable. I guess in that type of situation, if there were a waiver process in place, they could say, well, it doesn't make sense, let's waive that requirement. But it would be something that, may need to be addressed on a case-by-case basis.
The other issue that I just wanted to check in with you on, as I listened to the explanation, it wasn't to solve today's housing shortage, it was to meet our 20-year, in part, to help meet our 20-year multifamily inventory requirement, is really what this was about, is how this fits into the pattern.
Right, and I guess, and I agree with that, and I mean, I understand that, and I hear what you're saying, and I think even with that in mind, then it's okay to keep the bar relatively high on ADUs, and over time, we can lower it, but I don't see a big upside for the city to come in with a really low bar, just because this is a long-term thing that we're just stepping into. So why not start somewhere up here, be a little more conservative with it, and then if that's too conservative, you can lower it over time.
So the conservative thing would be the parking requirement, and what's the other one?
That, for us, really, there were other concerns that SCAN had, but I think the parking issue is one that aligned with the other neighborhood associations to a large extent, and to public comments, and to the the staff report. So
Okay.
rather than ask for everything that SCAN wants, we'll try to just,
Thanks, Jeff.
thank you.
Counselor Cook?
So thank you again for coming, Jeff. And
Yeah.
I know that when we've talked to staff, they're anticipating, it's always hard to tell how many people would apply or how many people will end up doing the EDUs. It could be a large amount or it could not be. Would SCAN be more willing to move forward with the current parking proposal if we were to put a monitor requirement, like a sunset clause or a time to reevaluate, given a reasonable time frame of 1 to 2 years, where we say, okay, we've given it a go to make sure we don't have the unnecessary bureaucracy. Let's see where we are in 2 years. 5 people have applied. There have been no complaints on street parking. It's been very reasonably worked out. We think that it's okay. Or in 5 years, there's no parking in SCAN. It's generating these complaints. We need to reevaluate it. Would this be something to move forward with and help people feel less concerned in SCAN about the standards that you're talking about?
I mean, I think, I don't know that I can speak what SCAN would or wouldn't support. I think generally the staff did a nice job in addressing a lot of the concerns that SCAN had. I think that you could put the parking requirement, off-street parking spot requirement in place and just revisit it at a later date. Whether you sunset it or not, I don't know, but.
Thank you.
Counselor White, yeah.
So you mentioned recommending a conservative approach to this, and I guess my question is, it seems like we're 20, 25 years behind most major cities in the Northwest on this topic. Isn't that a conservative approach where?
Well, yeah, it's not unreasonable to look at it that way, but then again, I'm just looking at it in terms of the city identified a housing shortage over the next 20 years. This is a drop in the bucket for a housing shortage. And I'm not opposed to doing it, and that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying you're going to have limited impact on housing availability through ADUs. So taking a conservative approach has very little downside, in my view.
Counselor Anderson?
Thank you for coming down, Mr. Schumacher, and sorry you had to wait through the hearing 2 weeks ago. You and Ms. Shirek, who are also here today. I want to focus on the parking issue too, and I understand that, having sat in your job for 2 years as president of SCAN. One of the issues that comes up with SCAN around the hospital and around the city, like Gaiety Hill and around the city, and then also around South Salem High School, is it's hard for residents to park there, and the solution that has been come up with is if you got a permit, you can park all day, and if you don't have a permit, you've got 90 minutes. And that idea, I think, was to move the people who don't live in the neighborhood and belong in the neighborhood and make sure they move.
Right.
Do you think maybe an expansion of that kind of program, if it turns out we're having, there is a potential, or there are problems with, there's another 5% of residents that now live in the neighborhood because there's 5% who are living in an ADU. Do you think that might help?
It might. I can say that on our July agenda, we have 2 different proposals to do just that from a couple different neighborhood areas. So that's kind of becoming that's maybe
to deal with the problem.
Yes, which, anyway, so this would just exacerbate that even slightly, but anyway, that's our concern.
Thank you very much.
Counselor McCoy?
Hey, Jeff, thanks for coming down. Thanks for your service on the Neighborhood Association. I guess I'm going to take, I disagree to some sense with what you're saying, because if we're going to do this, I'll go preface that with, I did some research here, just got curious and went looking on the internet and reading about ADUs, and found out that you're right, this is not going to be something where we get thousands of units. It's not going to happen. We could get hundreds of units over an amount of time. If you do it over 20 years and we get 280 units, well, that's 10% of our shortage. That's not insignificant at that point. But the one thing they did say is that where it's worked, were the places where there weren't a lot of requirements and restrictions, on the building of them. And where it didn't work was where they had so many things piled up, people just threw up their hands and went, it's not worth it.
Right.
And the number one through the 2 or 3 different reports I read was a parking requirement.
Right.
That was the number one thing to start killing folks building these things and not. So if we're going to do this, and we're going to try to have this be of some use to the city, which is really the only reason I think we should be voting for it, that's the reason I don't agree with having a parking requirement on there. And to have no parking requirement, I also think with the curb cuts and the other things that happen, I think it's a wash. So, but keeping that in mind, I guess I will vote for it as it's proposed, just for that reason. If we want to have it to work, let's give it a chance to work. And moving forward, and to the flip side of what you've testified, if at some point it becomes an issue, we'll hear about it, and then we can deal with it that way. But to put this on here now, I think almost dooms the thing for a lack of effectiveness moving forward from the start.
My only
question mark on that?
if I could respond to that, if I could respond briefly, I understand what you're saying, and as a citywide issue, I agree with that. But let's say that we have an issue or a street in Scan that's already got residential parking permit on there, and somebody applies for an ADU. If there's a waiver process in place, as long as it's not overly bureaucratic, that it can be done quickly at an administrative level, where they say, well, you've got a huge parking problem on this block, you're going to have to provide one off-street parking spot. So I see where that would be a hurdle for some homeowners, but most homeowners in Salem, it could be easily waived. But there are some specific areas, some of them in Scan, that would really appreciate having this off-street parking requirement.
Councilor Cook.
So, thank you again for coming down, Jeff. And I know we keep coming back to this housing shortage and this creating more stock, which even though that may be the case, I don't see the fundamental driver behind the ADUs. I see it as a variety of homes. The people that I know that live outside of Salem that have chosen to do ADUs, it has been because of their elderly parents or because of their adult children. Being able to have the flexibility to provide care on site, and instead of having to pay for a facility to care for those individuals, they're able to hire someone to come in-house and keep costs down, so really like a continuity between generations. And in that case, there wouldn't be a car. And what I'm hearing you say is that that would be a prime target for your waiver, that you could say this is in-house and we have a waiver, but where your concern would be is if the house was sold and then someone bought it and decided to do 2, now you've got a problem with transit, is that right?
I'm not sure I follow it all the way through, but just the idea that, if somebody can make the case that, the person that's going to be living in the ADU doesn't have a car or whatever, then they can get the waiver.
Okay. Are there any other questions rather than debate, Jeff?
Thank you for your patience.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Dan Dorr.
Good evening, Mayor and Councilors. I'm Dan Dorn, P.O. Box 3577, Salem, Oregon. I am here tonight testifying for the Home Builders Association of Marion and Polk Counties. We are very supportive of the ADU ordinance. We're strong supporters or proponents of consumers having flexible variety in housing choices. ADUs more efficiently use the land within inside the urban growth boundary. This encourages density and it eases future pressure on the urban growth boundary. ADUs can provide more affordable housing options than exist in the market today, increasing importance as housing becomes even more expensive. ADUs provide homeowners with flexible space for on-site caregivers, as Commissioner Cook stated, and also a space for elderly family members and young family members to remain in the family environment or move home if that's the case. ADUs can offer homeowners opportunities for additional rental income. We agree with the Planning Commission's recommendation not to require additional off-street parking. Additional off-street parking results in unsightly concrete taking the place of current landscaping. It also reduces on-street parking by, as was stated, eliminating some curb space. It also is a disincentive to ADUs because it increased the costs of building ADUs. And we also agree with the Planning Commission's recommendation to increase the height to 25 feet from the original 20-foot, as it gives and provides greater architectural flexibility to construct attractive ADUs with steeper pitched roofs, and allows a plan that better fits the existing building. That concludes my testimony, unless you have any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Dorn?
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. That's the end of the list. Is there anyone else who wanted to testify on this? Mr. Fry.
Yeah, my name is Rich Fry. I am currently the president of the Salem Planning Commission. I sat on the Housing Needs Analysis, also sat on the ADU committee. I would like to, first of all, say that Lisa and Eunice did a great job preparing this and getting through all the different steps here. First of all, I would like to say that the ADUs, they're not a solution for all of the issues that we have with multifamily and the rest of that, but it is a different style of housing for elderly or your kids that come back from college, or your mom and dad that live on the property with you. We went through all of the different configurations of this during the public hearings and the rest of that we did for the ADUs. And parking really was not a great big factor for a lot of people at the public hearings, which I was, or in the open houses, that I was kind of surprised with that it came that way. Their recommendation was, one, we removed it simply because we felt that it would remove on-street parking as well. A lot of people have two-car garages with driveways already, so there is additional parking there. There was a move to change our code so that if you converted your garage into an ADU, that the parking in front of the garage would now be allowed, because according to code it was not allowed. Once you converted your garage, you had to no longer park there. So we do think that there's plenty of opportunity for parking, and again, if in a year or so we have 500 of these things, which I don't think we will, we can go back and visit that and see where we've missed. But if we make it too restrictive, they're never going to happen in the first place. These things are between $70,000 and $100,000 a piece. So they are expensive to build. Those are estimates from the Portland area. The other thing that I want to address is the SDCs. In many cases, people are going to be able to use the same water meter. They may have a different hookup to the sewer or something like that, but if we start adding another $15,000 on top of the cost of these things already, we might as well not even do them. Portland, they did a moratorium on their SDCs, and it was so popular that they extended it for another year. And so I really think that's something that council needs to consider.
I had a question on the SDCs.
Yes.
Then there are, in the ordinance that you all are sending us, that we're looking at tonight, the SDCs are not there?
Correct.
Okay. Councilor McCoy.
Hi, Rich. So did Portland, I understand there what you said, did Portland have SDCs initially with their ADU, and then they went, this isn't working, so we're going to go moratorium and see what happens?
That's correct. And after the first, I believe, year or 2 years, it was so successful that they decided to continue the moratorium on the SDCs.
Well, so the ADU uses the existing lateral, or how does it hook up?
I'm not exactly sure how they do it in
They use that, but would there
But
be a
they could use the
requirement?
same water meter,
Same meter,
because if you have a large enough meter, you're only adding 1 or 2 fixtures, so you'd have the same water meter.
Okay.
It is possible that you would tie into the same line as it goes into the sewer,
okay,
so it's the same tap. I don't know how Salem would deal with that.
okay,
That might be a Peter question.
yeah. That's okay.
Anything else?
Anyone?
Nope.
Nope.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, I have no one else signed up. Did you have a question?
This is staff.
Well, we're going to do staff in a second. I just want to make sure there's no other member of the public that wanted to testify on this. Okay, any questions for staff? Councilor Nanki.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Parking in front of converted garages. That was the other thing I was going to ask about during the work session, because I'd been out with Brady to places, and people just have a problem when you tell them they can't park in their driveway just because of the garage isn't at the end of it anymore. We're going to pick up a ton of parking spaces for existing conversions.
Yeah.
Well, how many of those do we have now? Any clue?
No clue.
Well, there were a dozen in Ward 1 at least, I think.
Yeah, because like I
Sure
say,
about 'em.
people very angry that
Yeah.
I can't park in my driveway just
Okay.
because there's not a garage at the end of it.
Councilor Anderson.
Thank you. And this is a question for Director Fernandez on the SDCs. I'm starting to learn about those along with Mr. Fry on a task force. And as I understand it, with respect to the water, the sewage, and the stormwater, this is an area where even if we wanted to charge SDCs, we wouldn't because they're already using the existing facilities that are there.
Right, so we charge SDCs by the water meter. If they're using the same meter,
Right. Right.
there's no charge.
Which would certainly be an incentive to use the same meter.
Right. I think if there was a need to tap into the sewer at a different location, if it was a different lateral, my sense as I sit here is if they're not changing the meter, we would
Yeah.
simply allow it because we
Yeah,
charge
and
sewer
require
based on the water meter as well.
It would be their cost to hook up to the city meter or city's
To
pipe,
tap
city pipe,
the
yeah.
sewer, but I don't think we charge an SDC simply
Sure.
to tap the sewer.
Sure. And then the two that could potentially be charged, as I understand it, would be transportation and parks.
Right. So our sense is charge transportation at an apartment rate, not at a single-family rate, which is lower, and then parks, because that's what we charge, again, for residential. But storm is based on the lot,
Sure,
the single-family lot, so
Sure.
that doesn't matter. And again, the water sewer is by the
So
the water meter.
the transportation would not be what, if it was an SDC, it would not be what you charge for a single-family dwelling. It would be some sort of based on apartments.
An
and
apartment
something
dwelling
less.
unit, yeah,
And the
significantly less.
parks would be toward a single-family dwelling?
I don't remember what.
It would be multifamily.
Also a multifamily.
Okay,
Thank
so
you, guys.
so the SDCs would be reduced, but now I'm getting confused by my own questions. SDCs are not in this ordinance right now.
No.
You're correct. So right
Okay.
now, because our ADUs aren't allowed, we don't have an actual fee just for SDCs, but based on our current SDC rules, correct me if I'm wrong, the way we would interpret it, we would charge for the parks and transportation as a multifamily unit.
Okay, so
Which is
it doesn't have to
significantly
be in the ordinance for ADUs because it's covered someplace else in the city rules and regulations?
Well, we would need to propose, I believe we would need to propose an amendment, right, to Chapter 41 or...
To the extent that we can interpret the current methodology to allow for it, we wouldn't need an amendment, but it sounds like in some, at least for a couple of these, we might.
So it would be, I mean, as things stand right now, there might be SDC charges at a much reduced rate for transportation and parks. And if I recall what that was, yeah, it was a couple $1,000s on each of those are what the SDC charges are?
Go ahead, I believe it's in the staff report.
Roughly 2,700 for parks, then 13 or 1,400 for transportation.
And that's at the full bore rate, so what would be Or is that the reduced
That's
rate?
the apartment rate.
Okay, so that's $4,000. Okay, thank you.
So this contains a $4,000 SDC per unit, is what we're being told. I thought we were told no SDCs. I just want to understand this.
What staff is telling the council is that this is a dwelling unit that's being constructed, and SDCs are applicable to it.
No, what I heard was no SDCs. Now I'm hearing just over $4,000 of SDCs. I just want to make sure I understand what I'm voting for here.
Lisa Anderson Ogilvie, your interim Community Development Director. So what's in the staff report on page 10 is what the SDCs that we have adopted today, how would we would interpret and apply those to ADUs. There is a committee that's working to look at all the city's SDCs, and at that time could decide to have a different SDC for ADUs or waive SDCs if that's the way the council wants to go. But right now, there are SDCs that apply to new dwelling units. We think the multifamily rate is what would apply. So if this were to pass and you were to come in and build one, you would have a $4,000 SDC bill at this time. So we're not proposing any changes to SDCs at this point.
Okay, good. That wasn't clear to me. Councilor Cook.
So all this talk of charges and one-time charge for the build got me thinking of utility lines and streetlight fees. So if someone is hooking up water, and I assume electricity, they're going to be on separate billing for the two homes or the same billing? And it would just be the one streetlight fee?
No, and if they're not pulling a different water meter, it would all be on the same bill.
one. Okay, so no additional streetlight fee?
No.
Because it's the same location?
Right. If they want to create a separate, they want to rent it out and have a separate water bill, then they would need to pull a meter. Then they would be charged the water sewer SDC as a separate meter, and then they would be charged a separate street light, everything else that's on the water bill.
And you're saying with the current capacity of the system right now, with both water and sewer, it can take the extra added density for the additional lines that would come in? Yeah, we're in good shape?
Yeah.
Okay, just double checking.
Yeah, thank you. Yes.
I'm curious, too, about how will these be addressed? How will people get their mail? It maybe seem odd, but I've heard different stories on the problems people run into getting mail. Will this be, 111 and a half? What will be the address of the ADU? Have you worked with the post office on that?
Actually, the building division assigns addresses for the city of Salem. We don't do halves. There's room in between existing addresses to give a new number. So we would give them a new number based on the methodology in our code for how we address properties.
So if I'm 955, it would be 957, my next door neighbor's 965. There'd be something like that?
Exactly. Right.
Yeah,
There'd be
okay.
something in between.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. What do we do next with this thing? Close the hearing. Close the hearing. Now close public hearing. Councilor McCoy,
I move the staff recommendation.
second by Nanki. Discussion? Councilor McCoy, do you want to discuss this?
We've gone through this several times, gone through a work session. I think the staff's done a really, really good job, clear job of outlining what the issues are. I agree with what, basically, the result and what they're proposing. I think it's very well thought out. It'd be good for the community. We'll see if this works or not, but everything I said, going back to my little speech question there, I think if this is going to work, we're giving it a shot to work with the way we're approaching this and the way we're going to, control it. And so I think this is a good thing. I will be voting yes.
Councilor Hoy?
Thank you. I also support this. As written, I want to thank the staff for really laying this out in a way that people who aren't experts in this area can really understand it. So I really appreciated that, and I appreciated some of the presentations I've heard in the past at the neighborhood associations. They were very helpful as well. And I just want to comment about the parking specifically. I support not requiring additional parking. I think that we should not assume that everybody is going to own a car. And I think if we were to require it, we're assuming that everybody's going to own a car, and I don't think that's the direction we're headed, and I don't think that's where we ought to be. So I support not requiring parking.
Councilor Cook?
I really want to thank again staff for making the job easy on this decision and also for incorporating the testimony that we heard at the neighborhood levels. But is this the time for a amendment or to ask for a movement? I'm wanting to see if we can add a review in 2 years, whether it's a sunset provision or if that's something that we would want to just reevaluate to make sure that, number one, we have a mechanism that we're going to evaluate for, and that we've got a reporting system in place to be able to monitor complaints. I know I've repeatedly been calling attention to code compliance and the staffing issues there. I want to make sure that we have a way to track it and we know what we're looking for so that if this is working, we can move forward, and if we have issues, we can adjust it.
I'm going to call on city attorney. I'm not sure we need to go that far at this point. Let's hear what he has to say.
I think, as Lisa has testified previously, typically we'll come back within a year with an update on a new program to let council and the public know how the program's working, if there's changes that needed to be made. This wouldn't be something typically we would put in an ordinance. The city manager can promise to the council that we'll come back at an appropriate time. If you want it to be 2 years, that's fine. I think typically we do 1 year.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
And is the planning division monitoring the complaints, or will that be done by code compliance as traditionally?
It'll be done by code compliance, but we can be sure to get those together and track them for you.
And then the city manager.
Well, I was going to say on that point, we can certainly include if there are complaints, if there are some, I guess, lessons learned, certainly include that in the annual report to council.
Okay, thank you. I withdraw my motion.
Is that? Yeah.
Perfect.
Good. Okay. Councilor Anderson.
Thanks. I want to echo what Councilor Hoy said about we don't really need to assume that everyone is going to have a car, and in some way it kind of encourages it going that way. And I think that's especially true in the ADUs for the reasons that we've discussed. Of course, I join in the staff. You should both pat yourself on the backs. But I also want to thank the neighborhood groups, because especially the core neighborhood groups in the core city, they've taken a lot of interest in this. And I appreciate what Mr. Schumacher said in that the staff has incorporated much of the material and the responses and the input that's been given to them by the neighborhood group. And so I think commendations run both ways on that.
Councilor Kaiser.
Thank you. Kudos to all, yes. It was good, and I'm happy for the public outreach too, so I've been following it for the last, over a year now, I think it's been happening. I do have a concern about the height with the buildings, and I'm thinking particularly of my neighborhood where a lot of the houses are 1 story. There's lots of 2-story too, but there's 1 story. And I'm especially thinking of their mid-century houses that are typically ranch 1-story style houses, and thinking of buildings in the backyard that are maybe 10 feet higher than that, and that not fitting into the neighborhood very well. There's already in the proposed code language, it's already requiring if you have an addition that it be the same height as the house. So I don't see why that wouldn't also be for this detached ADU, that provision also to match the height of the house. So I would like to make an amendment and a motion to require ADUs to be no taller than the primary structure on the lot. Not, well, sure. Maximum limit 25 feet. Yep, whichever is lower.
Is there a second?
Second, sure.
Second by Austin. Okay. Discussion.
I'll just speak to it really quick. I think if you look in terms of what's going to fit in to our neighborhoods, if we're allowing structures to be taller than the primary residence, that's going to start to look funky, to put it in a very bluntly. And I've been in those areas where they allow infill that's very different than the current existing stock. And I only need to look to my own neighborhood across, my side of the street, our houses are anywhere from 20 to 25 feet, although mine is a little bit lower than that. Across the street, though, I had a brand new house built as an infill, and it's probably 40 feet tall. And it's considerably taller. And it just starts to look weird when you have this gigantic house, especially in our older neighborhoods. I think the typical kind of more modern neighborhood starting in probably the 80s, you have just more large houses and footprints. But in our older stock neighborhoods, you generally have smaller footprints and the houses just aren't as tall. And I think it's a pretty I think it's not a onerous amendment to this. It's basically just looking at preserving the character of the neighborhoods to make sure things fit in and you don't have something kind of towering over the primary residence. So these are accessory dwelling units, not primary dwelling units, and I think they should remain accessory.
Councilor McCoy.
I think a question. I thought I heard in the staff report, the reason there wasn't a height requirement, one of the reasons was because so you could put them on garages. I mean, wasn't that one of the logical reasons why that was the way it was? And if you could address that.
Right, so the 25 feet, well, it started as 20, went to 25 feet, was for a two-story ADU or an ADU above your garage. And I should have clarified, for the existing buildings, it is 28 feet. If you do an addition to an existing house, it's 28 feet, or the size of the current size of the house, whichever is greater.
Can you,
So if your house is taller than 28 feet, you could have a taller addition. Is that what you mean? Yeah. Otherwise, it would be less than 28 feet. If your house was 15 feet tall, you'd have a 15-foot tall addition, not a 28-foot tall addition.
No, you could go to 28 feet.
Oh, you could go all the way up to 28 feet.
But only if it was in your above your garage?
I'm just talking about any addition to your house.
Oh, in general.
In the single-family zone.
So if you have a house now and you do an addition, we look at the existing height of your house, and you can go 28 feet with your addition, or you can match the existing height. Whether the addition's for an ADU in the future, if it's a bedroom, whatever it is, that's what applies now. So that's what we were thinking. You might already have a one-story, and then you can end up with a two-story addition to it. So there's no restriction that you can't do that already. But I think I would like to clarify if your motion was just for the detached ones in the backyard?
It was just for the detached.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm not, okay, so if, I'm
You can
not
put
sure
tall
this
additions on your
makes
house
a lot of
currently.
sense to me yet. I can now add a 28-foot tall addition to a one-story house.
Yes, that's existing.
This would stop, this would be to block the detached 25-foot addition that might be 10 feet away from the
Yes.
house.
Right.
Correct.
Okay, I'm not sure the aesthetic, I'm not sure I track the aesthetic. I'm almost kind of willing to trust the person who owns the property not to decrease their property value. I'm not sure that's the, I'm just not sure I understand the rationale for this at this point. I just can't quite follow it, except to limit someone's ability to put an accessory dwelling unit on top of a garage, which appears to be the problem.
Well, if I could just respond, I actually have a case specific in mind in the city of Salem in Ward 5, where there's, I don't know exactly what they're doing, but there's a single-story 1950s ranch house, and then there's a two-story modern house being constructed immediately behind it. And that house, in a neighborhood of one-story ranch houses, just sticks out like a sore thumb.
Okay.
And I know all the neighbors are not going to be happy about that going in, because
Yeah.
it's this totally out-of-place structure. So I think we just need to be mindful of the character of our neighborhoods.
Oh, I think we are being
and what-
mindful.
and
I
what-
live in those, I
and what
own
we're-
property right down the street from you, and I'm thinking about what that's like.
So, but I think just matching the height of the existing structure is not
Yeah.
onerous.
Okay, yeah.
Just to touch on that, because I know I spoke with planning about this before, and this isn't my ward, but it's Nanke's in my stomping ground, bordering Woodmancy. There were a lot of bungalow, two-bedroom, one-bath homes that were built in the 50s that bordered the park, really deep lots. But it was okay with code. It's totally legal to do that when they sold those houses, they divided the lots. And so sometimes they kept the little two-bedroom, one-bath home in the front, and then behind it is a mansion. That's, 5-bedroom, 4-bedroom, great for a family. But you're right, not in keeping, because the needs change over time. If it was just two people in a home and now you're wanting to house more. So, what you're talking about would already be legal if someone wanted to subdivide or if someone was wanting to do that. But we're talking about the ADUs in this case, so how do we keep it? If someone's wanting to add an apartment above a garage, it would seem like seems like a pretty reasonable thing to do, but at the same time, if the garage is totally not in keeping, I'm just wanting to see how that would be resolved, because I'm not indifferent to your concern. I completely agree with it, but seeing as how that's happened around my ward before, I'm not sure this is the best way to tackle that.
Councilor Anderson.
Thank you. I think part of this problem will be addressed by the fact that these houses can only be no more than 900 square feet. So, you know, unless you're building a house that is 40 square feet and just shoot it straight up, you know, you've got an issue there. I mean, that's sort of taken care of. But as I understand Councilor Kaiser's motion, it would only apply to detached units that are not attached to the house and are not on top of the garage, but are sitting out in the back or side yard on their own. Is that correct? That's correct. Okay.
Okay, we're going to need to have that restated again then. I think there's been enough crosstalk to get this.
I agree.
Yeah, let's get real clear on what the motion is then.
So my motion is to amend the proposed ordinance to limit the height of the detached ADU to 25 feet or the height of the primary building.
Okay, I want to get
Whichever
real
is less.
clear then, because you just had a conversation kind of with Councilor Anderson where he described putting it on top of a garage. That doesn't count. In other words, I'd have to put a 25-foot building on top of a 20-foot garage. Do you see what the...
Are you talking about a detached garage?
Detached garage.
Detached garage and building a second story on it? Then
Yeah, that's
the whole
what you said,
thing,
okay
The
to.
the whole thing should be then 25 feet or as tall as the house.
So you
the
can't
primary
build on
residence.
top of a detached garage?
You
Okay.
can if it's
Did you
25
understand
feet
that?
or the height of the primary building.
I understand it now, and I'm not in favor of that part of it because the garage is the building that's already there.
Right.
I think the real issue that I think Councilor Kaiser is trying to address is somebody builds something back in their back part of their lot that is within 5 feet of the lot line, and they're looking, we see this thing all the time, they're looking right over into the neighbor's backyard. I think that's what the issue to me
We
is.
need
as-
this real clear
Yeah.
at this point, unless you understand what she's saying. Okay.
Let me try again then.
Okay.
So let's exclude garages and additions to the house and just focus on brand-new ADU, and it be 25 feet or the height of the primary residence, or whichever is less.
Yeah.
Is that already in the measure?
So just,
No, it's not.
if I could clarify, it would only apply to a two-story structure that was 100% ADU with no garage.
Right.
If you're coming in to build a new one and you want to build the garage with the house, with the ADU above it, you could be higher?
No, it wouldn't. If you're thinking of an existing garage and building onto the existing garage, then that would be, I guess, excluded, since it doesn't sound like that has support.
But if you're building a new garage,
If you're building a brand-new building, something that doesn't exist, it's just earth, and you want to build an ADU, that it can't be taller than the existing house.
Unless you put it on top of a garage.
And then
And then you're limited to 25 feet, right? I believe that's how
what
it
you're saying
is.
then, okay.
that's what
And
the
isn't that what the
proposal
measure already is?
That's
You
what
can't
it
build
already
a 30-foot structure on top of a garage under this. It can only be capped at 25
capped at
feet,
25.
correct? Yeah.
I guess that's why I don't understand the
Yeah.
amendment. I think that's what it already.
So I have another question now, so it goes to this amendment for the staff. It can only be, if somewhere in there, it can be 900 feet. Isn't there a percentage of the lot? It can, 60% of
Yeah,
the lot?
60%, correct.
Right?
Yes.
So if you start limiting these and they want a 900 square foot, single-story ADU, I don't know, I'm not going to do the math, but is that going to fit on the normal lot? Will you even be considering? Could they even be built? I mean, this might be preventing them from even building a 900 square
is.
foot
It might just be a
ADU
smaller.
if they have to keep it at one story and it takes too much of the lot.
Tiny house, tiny house.
Tiny house.
No, it's different, though.
Okay. So everyone
It will begin
understands her
to
motion.
impact the square
The
footage,
size,
yes.
right.
It will begin to impact the square footage
Yeah.
if you limit it to one
It's going
story
to limit what they could build.
with, yes, with the other regulations.
Who's the second on this motion? Ossick, okay. We done discussing this? Does everyone,
I didn't think it'd be that confusing. I'm a little surprised.
well, I think
So
it's
this
when you
is-
put, you're taking in and out the garage, and I think that is confusing. I do.
And it's not already included in what's happening with what you've put forward with planning. I guess I'm unclear as to how it's different than what's already proposed.
It's,
What's proposed now is that you can build an ADU 5 feet from the property line, and it can go up to 25 feet. And I'm trying to say that we should.
Or as tall as the house.
No, that's not in the current code. That's what I'm proposing.
Oh, okay.
Is that if you have, say, a 15-foot tall house, that the ADU should either match that height, or if you have a 40-foot tall house, then it can go up to 25 feet.
And
But I'm
if you-
trying to limit the
this
height.
is not
of
an
things, so-
or. This is, I'm telling you, it is going to be this height. That's the, I think you're saying or, and I don't think there is an or here, is there?
I'm saying you have the option, if your house is, say, 20 feet tall, and you want to build an ADU, then you can build it up to the height of your current house, which would be 20 feet. If you're,
Not 25 feet.
right. If your house is 40 feet tall, then you can build up to 25 feet, which is the maximum allowed under the proposed code.
Only to detach.
To detached ADUs.
That don't include a garage.
Maybe this is one to revisit
Can we-
after we see a few built to see if this ever happens, because this sounds pretty theoretical at this point. Well, you ready to vote on this? Okay.
No,
No,
I don't understand what we'll be voting on.
I know.
So I'm not comfortable voting until I understand it.
Could you ask her then, could you ask Counselor Kaiser, kind of take you through it again?
Counselor Kaiser or staff, could you maybe restate what the proposed amendment is in really plain language for me, please?
I believe the amendment is to change the height for detached, so when you build a new one in the backyard, we're proposing 25 feet. I believe the amendment will limit that. If your house is not currently 25 feet, then you wouldn't get to build to 25 feet. You could only build to the height of your existing house. Unless there's a garage. That part I'm unclear. I think if there's a garage, maybe then the height restriction doesn't apply.
I think the garage was brought up by some other counselor for some reason. Just, it doesn't, yeah. Counselor Anderson.
What do you think, Counselor Hoyt?
I'm looking at the proposed code at the 25 feet. So we're looking at, I don't have page numbers, but it's under facts and findings. It's number 3. And it's the Planning Commission held a public hearing, blah, blah, blah. And they had 3 recommendations. They had 2 revisions, and one of those revisions was increase the proposed maximum height for a detached ADU from 20 feet to 25 feet. And my amendment would just simply say, proposed maximum height for a detached ADU would be 25 feet, or the height of the primary residence, whichever is less.
So that would include garages, which the current
Yeah,
ordinance does.
okay. So you can't build on top of a garage in the backyard.
Your garage could already be higher than your house.
Unless your house is
2 stories or more. Okay, well, that's just clear. Is everybody ready to vote?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're just voting on the amendment, correct?
Yes. All those in favor of the amendment say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay.
Nay.
Okay, opposed? Hands up. 4 to 4. Okay, motion, the amendment dies. Okay, we'll move on to the main motion.
call the question.
Okay, all those in favor of the staff recommendation say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes.
Nice job. It didn't take like 5 years.
Okay, we have a second hearing.
Okay.
Thank you.
The City Council will now hold a public hearing for the purpose of receiving public testimony regarding setting fees and charges for the Planning Division of the Community Development Department and the Public Works Department.
Staff recommend, yeah, report.
Yes, hi.
I know you're still
I'm still happy about the last thing, yes. Good evening, Lisa Anderson Ogilvie, Interim Community Development Director. So land use fees need to have a public hearing because changes to land use fees are considered a land use action. So tonight we have a 2.6% increase to land use fees. Those are planning division fees and the land use fees that are in the Public Works Department. And we're also introducing a few new fees, short-term rental and accessory short-term rental license fee that we discussed at length before last month. So we'll have that fee in place when the ordinance is effective. And we're introducing a fee for expedited subdivisions, which is a type of land use that we didn't have a fee that covered. And we're modifying the fee for historic demolition review. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
There is no one signed up for public, no member of the public signed up to speak on this. Anyone here that wanted to speak on this particular issue? Okay, any questions for staff? Yes.
When were the last time that these fees were updated? Do you have a date?
Last year.
Last year?
Yes.
All right.
We've been doing them annually for the last 3 years, so we had let them lapse for a while, but we've started annually increasing them by the Consumer Price Index.
Okay.
Okay. Any further questions? Councilor McCoy.
I move the staff recommendation.
Second.
Second by Ossick. Any discussion?
Oh, no, why bother?
All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes.
We'll see by unanimous consent that it was closed.
Okay, special orders of business, Councilor Anderson. You're going to start with 3.2D. Am I
I
right?
move the staff recommendation.
Second.
Second by Ossick.
It's the police station bond. I'm all in favor of this. I think it's terrific, and I'm really looking forward to giving our police and the community the station they deserve. I just do have some questions that I raised with the city manager and the mayor earlier today about the whole process, and I hope that we can come up with some sort of way that we can look at selection of architect, design, all that other sort of stuff with as much community involvement as possible. And also like to point out to the other members of the council and the mayor that Councilor Hoy, in his professional life, was responsible for building a jail in Lincoln County. So I think there's some expertise that he might be able to bring to this issue too. So I hope we can have an open and inclusivist process in selecting the architect and looking at the design and that sort of thing. But I cheer the passage of this the bond, putting the bonds out for sale.
Great. Mr. City Manager.
Well, I heard a couple of requests within that comment by Councilor Anderson. Under the city code, the selection of professional services, really all contracting, all purchasing is the responsibility of the city manager. It's not an inclusive process. The selection of the architect, certainly the selection of the architect will be based upon a qualification-based approach that's required under state statute. And also in talking with staff and from the feedback that I have received from counselors and from the community, certainly factors that will be looked at in addition to the qualifications of the architects will be their experience working with governing bodies, their experience working with communities on public facilities, also looking at their experience specifically with police facilities or law enforcement facilities. What they would recommend as an approach to include community input on design features of the building. We need to balance that with the time that we're required to get the building built, which is 3 years. If we're not successful within 3 years, there are tax consequences. There are financial penalties, basically. So we'll have to develop that further once we have an architect selected. But I will assure council that the criteria that will be used for the selection of the architectural firm will very much include some of the concerns, some of the requests of working with the community, working with the governing body on the design of this very important public facility.
Thank you, City Manager. So I presume that the criteria will be something that'll be published and we'll be able to look at and make some comments on before you appropriately, administratively choose the architects?
I can certainly provide the request for proposals.
Yeah,
yes.
I think we'd love to see that, and maybe even, if possible, have a short period of time at least to provide some comment on the makeup of the request for proposal.
Well, again,
Unless you're saying it's statutorily mandated that it be A, B, C through Z, or if you have some flexibility in what you're looking for in a request for proposals.
we'll be looking for police facility experience specifically. We'll be looking for approaches to the design of a police facility or a public facility of this size and scope. We'll be looking at their experience, they said earlier, working with a governing body, working with a community. We'll be looking at the experience specifically of the principals. We'll be looking at who would be assigned to our project. There are a variety of factors that will be looked at, of qualifications, and I can share those with council.
And it sounds like, well, we really have two sort of issues here. Who do we select, and then what the design will be, and how that'll move forward. And it sounds like there is the possibility for greater input from public and council at the design element than the selection element?
Yes, and I would want further discussion with council regarding that level of engagement
Sure,
and,
sure.
and involvement.
Well,
as we
and we're
move.
clearly not going to decide it tonight. I just raised the issue so it can be on our radar that we can look about this, because, you know, we had great community support here in voting for the bond measure to build the station, and I'd like to continue to have that community support all the way through the completion of what I'm sure will be a fantastic station.
Councilor Nanke.
Thank you. And just going back numerous years in regards to the convention center when we put it in, and council tried to get involved into the design of that for a little bit, and then found rationality rather than trying to choose the colors and what have you. So it's nice to go out and get public input, but then let the non-policy makers do their job and build the building. They have to live with it. We're short-term here. But the community's here as well, so you have to hear from them and talk to it. It's when we try to start designing things that it gets really ugly.
Councilor Cook.
So I appreciate this discussion, and with respect to what Councilor Nanke is saying, I think sometimes it's good just to clarify the process for feedback, because sometimes people can come to neighborhood associations and maybe it's not the color, but maybe they want to make sure that that a certain feature is incorporated, or that maybe an experience that they had in a police facility wouldn't be replicated. So with the process for giving feedback, I would want to make sure that we would know how to funnel that, and we don't have to do it right now. I know you were saying the decision for the architect traditionally lies with the city manager, and that we're on a time frame. So I'm thinking it might behoove this body to make sure that we have a process in place so that when people have concerns about the facility or certain design elements that they are interested in seeing incorporated, that they can go into a hopper or go into a feedback for the people making those decisions.
Yes,
If I may respond to
sorry.
Councilor Cook. It's not tradition, it's
sorry.
by code that
Thank
the
you,
selection
sorry.
is made by the city manager. This is a functional building. We are not building a community center. We're not building a center for public interaction. This is a functional workspace that has some very specific requirements.
It will be space that includes a crime lab. It will include an armory. It will include interview rooms and the need to separate victims from perpetrators. As I mentioned earlier, one of the criteria for the selection of the architect will be their experience working with the community on these very type of facilities. So I would encourage council, rather than providing input now on what you think the process should look like, I would encourage you to wait. Let's get the architect under contract, have the architect provide some suggestions on how to balance the need to get the project built with the need for community input, the need for transparency, the need for feedback to the residents of Salem.
Councilor Nanki.
Yeah, and just the other piece of that is, I know a lot of people like to include environmental, sustainable elements to those, and in our other staff report this evening, we talked about LEED certification on it already, so I mean, that's already going to be there. We're going to try to make it passive solar. I mean, anything you can do on the front-end design of a facility.
To hear you say those words. In the beginning, remember, we couldn't agree on what that meant.
As far as,
we're so
you know, the
excited.
development, this is the great time, and that's what that architect should bring, and if they don't.
The disagreement you do, I happen to know how a lot of this comes down. Did you want to talk about that?
I would like to respond to Councilor Nanki's point. I think those are examples of where there would be community feedback regarding some of those features of the facility that I don't want to say are discretionary, but are variable.
Right.
The outside of the building, not necessarily the color of the paint, but some of the features that would be perceived as more or less accommodating and welcoming to the public, as an example. And that's where an experienced architect who's done this before can help council, can help the community, certainly help staff with that. This is an approach that accomplishes keeping the project on schedule, keeping the project on budget, and is responsive and respectful to the values of Salem as articulated by its elected representatives.
Councilor Anderson.
Thank you. I agree with everything that Councilor Nanki and the city manager has said. You know, this is a highly esoteric and developed kind of building that the people who know how to do that are the people who should do it. My concern is just what Councilor Nanki and the city manager said. It's how the building interfaces with the public and the areas of public access, you know, the facade of the building, et cetera, as opposed to what are we going to do with the crime lab? How big is the victim space? You know, we cannot micromanage that. It would be a disaster. That's what the pros need to do, but I'm just concerned about the things that we mentioned, how the building interfaces with the public.
Yeah. Good. I think we're all in agreement then. What else do you want to move on to, Councilor? What?
Yeah, vote.
Want to vote?
We could.
Okay, let's vote. All those in favor of the motion? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Okay. Councilor Anderson, 3.3B.
There you go.
Thank you.
Back together, David.
Yeah. I move that we authorize the city manager to execute a grant agreement for $5,000 with Osborne Adventures to fund infrastructure costs for the 6 bike share stations.
Second.
And if I could speak to that.
Sure.
I think this money is peanuts. 2,000, well, this is what I say all the time when I'm in negotiations with my clients. I say to my clients.
You're on tape here.
Yeah, the small amount of money means more to the other side than it means to you, and I think that's kind of where we are here. This is $2,000. I'm quite intrigued with the idea of getting the extra money to put something at the bus station, because that to me seems as kind of a seamless thing for the people who are coming down. And I do note that this comes from parking money, and I would say that you know, every bicycle that's going downtown could theoretically lead to the need for one less parking space. So I think $5,000 would be an appropriate figure here.
Any, Councilor McCoy?
So if they're $500 a station, are we then going to get 10 stations? Or still, we're going to still get, where's the extra money going to be spent if we're not going to add any more stations?
Kristen Rutherford, Urban Development Director. So just to reconfirm, this is Parking Services General Fund money, not urban renewal money. So it doesn't have quite the same geographic constraints as if it were urban renewal funding. So this could fund additional installations up around the Capitol or over at Willamette, areas outside the parking district or the urban renewal area. The original plan was to fund 6 stations. This could increase that to 10 stations, or if that's the constraint we want to put on it, or we could leave, you could get one bike purchase. The bikes are $1,500, or you could do, there were other costs that were mentioned. So this is the station, but there were other installation costs that were mentioned that this could go for if there's some infrastructure, concrete work, something like that, that would be a part of installing a station.
I
cover
would
some of
limit
those
this
additional
to the
costs.
same sort of material we're talking about here, that it's the bricks and mortar concrete construction to build stations, not for purchase of a bike or any other kind of purchase. It's just for the on-the-ground infrastructure. And
So do you want to kind of restate your motion and catch all that?
Okay. I move that the city manager execute a grant agreement for $5,000 with Osborne Adventures to fund infrastructure costs for up to 10 bike share stations at $500 a station. And if, well, that's it. And that's all.
So you
I'll
want to
say.
put $500 per station? You want to put that kind of limit on the way she?
Well, no, I'm happy to say 10 stations. Up to 10 stations, and then she can,
Give her a lot of flexibility.
yes.
Yeah.
So my motion is to execute a grant agreement for $5,000 with Osborne Adventures to fund infrastructure costs for up to 10 bike share stations.
Okay. Councilor.
So,
Yeah, and what I heard was that there might be some complications in the installation at the transit mall. And so if,
Gives her more flexibility.
yeah, if you don't lock that 500 onto each of those stations, that'll give them the ability to utilize those funds up. So if you do an up to 10, maybe they can only do 7 because that one.
I appreciate the wisdom of my fellow councilors and the mayor on this issue.
Okay, good. I think we're in the right spot. Does everyone agree? Oh, Councilor Rossi.
Do we know, is that enough to get around that issue, the issue with getting one at the bus station? Because I think that's the
5,000?
concern, is to have that central
Be like 3,000 more than what we have now.
area.
we may call Mr. Osborne up here. I haven't seen cost estimates for what the additional infrastructure work would be at the transit center. And I'm not sure if he has those engineering numbers yet.
But since it's going to be his problem, how to get this money.
Well, these are unforeseen infrastructure costs because of where the stations might need to be located based on permit requirements or right-of-ways. If there's not already infrastructure there to host a station, we might have to spend a little bit more to construct.
Does the $2,000 get you where you need to be with?
Every little bit counts. It is
Yeah,
peanuts.
well,
It is
you're getting a
peanuts.
little bit. Is that enough?
We'll take it. It's for the community. It's for the community.
Right, that's what I'm trying to understand.
If
Would
it-
this solve your transit station problem? Will this solve the problem you described?
It will not solve the problem, because the funding, most of it is towards the bikes, the actual user equipment.
Right,
And
but
that's
the
where
infrastructure problems.
the infrastructure, the problem is the actual cost of the station. So the actual infrastructure or the equipment that gets installed is 6% of the cost. But if there's like an actual cement patio that needs to be implemented or whatnot, then the price skyrockets, and those are unforeseen costs.
Well, I guess the question I'd have then, Ms. Rutherford, can he come back as this progresses so we can kind of keep up with it? If there's a lot of interest on council and keeping up?
Absolutely.
Okay. So this isn't your only bite of the apple here.
So
You just got a bigger bite, though.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Not yet. We're going to vote. And it's just peanuts, remember? That's, I think, the quote Councilor Anderson. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you, Councilor Anderson. We really want to see these bikes. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's the end of special information reports. Go ahead.
Okay, we got one information report here. Do you want me to go through them? I'm just going to speak to the one I want to talk about.
That's what I was hoping.
Go ahead. It's so,
Thank you. No, no.
I like to talk, so you tell me to go ahead here.
No. Just take the one you want to talk about.
I want to talk about 6D, which is the report on Lone Oak Road and Creekside Development. And I have a motion on this. I know that people have questions, but I would move that council instruct staff to return with a recommendation on how to proceed with this issue to include a preferred funding option for completion of the bridge and road.
Second by Nanki. So that, yeah, go ahead.
This is, you know, and just with questions I've heard and comments from councilors, this is confusing. There's a lot of moving parts here and a lot of different options for funding and a history involved in this and different ways to handle it and ramifications for the development of the surrounding area up until to the urban growth area to the south. And this, I sort of understand it because I've lived with it for years, but I just think doing this, having the staff come with the preferred option and then explain it to us is going to make it a lot clearer than us trying to hash out here exactly what's going on down there, what's gone on down there, how it transpired, and how given 6 options to fix it when there probably is one that's the best option that the staff's going to know much better than us which one that is. So that's the reason for the motion.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, sir.
So I would be interested to hear from staff more how, you know, more about the history. I read all the documents, but more about the history of how this transferred from a private problem to a public problem, because I'm very concerned about that and how it transformed and morphed over the years. And I understand it wasn't one event; it was a series of events, maybe a series of unfortunate events. But I would like to know more about that and options that help solve this problem without it being necessarily a public solution. But so I would be interested to hear some of those options.
No. I think that's, yeah, you heard that, I think, Peter, is what's being described. I think that's what we're all looking for, is that kind of description. Yes, Councilor.
Thanks. I agree. This is a problem now, but it shouldn't just be the city's problem. And you know, I read through all the 5 or 6 different options, and you know, I can see where I'd like to go as sort of the reimbursement district, but I'll leave that up to the staff as to what they present, because you know this issue more than we do. But you know, some of these just are clearly dismissible. I know you just said here all 6 potential options, and some of them are just a no-go from the get-go. I like that. Write that down, Steve. Peanuts, no-go from the get-go. Yeah.
That's good. Yeah.
Which is no-go from the get-go if you're allergic to it.
Yeah.
I would like to remind Counselor they're
They're not a nut, they're a legume.
Yeah, that's right. We'll discuss botany later.
Okay. Yes, Councilor Kaiser.
I just wanted to ask staff about this so that I'm clear. Initially, the HOA, they were going to go to LUBA to appeal the decision, and I wasn't quite sure about why. That really wasn't in the staff report. Were they concerned that the developer was not going to build the bridge and road, and is that why they appealed, or was it for some other reason? It's just not super clear.
Well, we have a member of the HOA sitting behind me, so I think the HOA was concerned that yet another phase of Creekside was being built and Lone Oak was not being addressed, and that was their concern. So when, in part, when the staff offered to put a portion of the funding of the bridge using transportation systems development charges, which are charged to development, in the CIP. I believe it gave the Creekside Homeowners Association some hope that at least the issue was going to begin to be addressed. And I think what you're seeing in the staff report, and if Councilor McCoyd's motion passes, is a further step in assuring that that the bridge over Jory Creek and then the rest of Lone Oak will move forward to construction in a reasonable amount of time.
Thank you. And I guess really quick, I would be interested in seeing in that staff report how this connection or the completion, I guess, of Lone Oak what does that do for us? We've gone this long without it. How many people are we actually serving with it? Because it's a chunk of change. Over $5 million.
So very briefly, there is a lot more development coming in south of the existing developed area. So I think it's an important connection. I think you'll see Lone Oak Road built out to Reese Hill, and I think you're going to see the UGB, the southern edge of the UGB is Reese Hill, and I think you're going to see all of that area come in for development in the foreseeable future. And this road is yet another important connection so that everything isn't shunted out to Sunnyside Road, which is what would happen without it.
Councilor Hoy.
Is that the same developer that didn't build the bridge that would be developing that?
No.
Okay.
No, there's significant pieces of property that are not the developer that has not built the bridge. There are other developments that are currently have subdivision approvals that are required to build the bridge, and I would anticipate that all development south to Reese Hill Road would be required to build this road. But as the staff report speaks to, no single developer can afford it. So we either create a de facto moratorium or we have some issues. So it's timely that we move forward, and it's timely that we create a funding plan to get it moved along. So I appreciate Councilor McCoyd's motion.
Is development on a pause right now pending this issue, or I'm concerned about that. Is there
We're up against some difficult discussion items here because of land use issues.
I can add a little bit to that. There's a couple of properties that have subdivision approval that Peter said one of them has a condition of approval that they build the bridge and the road. They've applied for a modification to that subdivision to, I believe, remove that condition, and we're in the process of addressing that application. I don't want to discuss it here because it could be an ex parte issue. But aside from that, as Peter said, there's a lot of properties downstream there that could benefit from it. I don't know that they're on hold because of this issue, but it's certainly a factor.
There's no plan in place as part of the problem is the real difficulty. And that's what I think McCoyd's motion speaks to, is to set up at least one methodology we can review, and probably additional ones we can review as well if we like one better than another. But I think he'll have a batch of them. Councilor Cook.
Just a point of clarification on the bridge with Creekside. How much is this also a fire safety issue, given the street widths? And
Thank you. Yes, it absolutely is. I think Mr. Fry, when he testified here a couple months ago, spoke to the issue that on Sahaley Street and then, and I think there's another street, it is basically a very long cul-de-sac. And so at some point, if there is going to be other development that is just access from that one point, there is a life safety issue, and fire may need to invoke other aspects of the fire code, such as forcing houses to be sprinkled.
Yeah.
And
yes, Councilor.
just a point of clarification with planning. So when the original developers submitted the plan, the goal was always that it would be a through street, and that's why they were allowed to build the street to the standards that fire truck.
No, there's no street width issue. It's the lack of a street that is the problem, because Jory Creek is in the way. Lone Oak is a collector in the transportation system plan, and at some point, we need that additional connection because everything is shunted up one street and then out, you have to go in the opposite direction to get, to get into town, you have to head south to Reese Hill and then back around.
But you stopped developing the homes at a certain point because they were too far away from that junction?
Well, nothing has been stopped. That's what Mr. Fry was speaking to, is if development continues and there's only this one way in and out, it creates a life safety issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay? So everybody, we'll look forward to his report. Yeah, I just want to make sure everybody knows what we're voting on.
What's the motion?
Do you want to hear the motion again? Go ahead.
Got it.
I move that council instruct staff to return with the recommendation on how to proceed with this issue to include a preferred funding option for completion of the, whoops, God dang it. I move that council instruct staff to return with a recommendation on how to proceed with the Creekside issue to include a preferred funding option for completion of the bridge and road.
Second.
And Ossick seconded, yeah. So all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Okay. Were there any other, yes?
Yeah, we had gone right by 6C, the Salem Strategic Plan.
Not
Yeah,
so
it's your
fast.
chance to.
Huh?
It's not
Oh, we're
there.
not? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we were there.
It was
No,
pulled.
this is,
was pulled.
these are
Free-for-all.
information reports.
I
Did you want to,
Yeah, we can comment or not.
yeah, comment or not? And you're more than welcome to comment on this.
On 6C, yeah.
Yes.
All right. Well,
ahead.
then, I had the pleasure of going to the strategic planning open house that was referred to in this, and that was really a kind of an eye-opening experience. There were so many people there that were testifying to, or voting essentially, that their top priority was that Salem move forward with building the bridge. And so, as I looked through this, it was kind of fun to see the backs of everybody who was there, but that was an interesting choice of pictures. But it was, out of the 8 goals there were 537 votes cast, and of those, 537 of the 1,153 votes cast were for infrastructure. And that's 47% of the total votes cast among all 8 different items that could be voted for. The next highest received 130, so 11% of the vote. So it seemed like the overwhelming majority of, or plurality, I should say. And, in addition, 78% of the people that went and put in an interest card there, there's 165 cards in that one area for building infrastructure, and particularly 78% of them saying build the bridge. So that seems like a pretty significant outpouring of support for that issue. So I just thought that, as I looked through this, I didn't see anything that even approached that. Everything else was not hardly on the list compared to that. And so I think, as we're considering what are the priorities for the city, it seems like, when you get that kind of a result, that we should be paying attention to it. I noticed, further on, there was an email from Jim Shepke about the climate action plan, and that he has 212 people that have signed the petition for that, which I think is commendable. And I believe everybody that, is in support of the bridge is also support of, of climate, of having our climate be as good as we can possibly have it. And one of the issues that I think the people are concerned with there is the idling in traffic, and being, concerned that that just goes on day after day after week, and that isn't helping us with our climate. The last comment I would say is that, with 212 people saying that that's important to them, that I think is great. The Salem Bridge Solutions Group has 2,125 signatures that are unduplicated of people who've signed the petition to say that city council should make that their number one priority. So I just, I notice these things and I'm thinking, this is my opportunity to say, I think, that's one that maybe this group wants to pay attention to.
I appreciate your comments. Yes.
I have a motion with respect to item number 6C. I move that the City Council, as part of its strategic plan, form a work group on a climate action plan.
Second.
And if I can speak to this, I will actually try to be brief for myself today, but you heard the comment today. You've read the comments that have been there, and I would adopt most of what people said, but I would also indicate that right now on our staff, we have someone with a master's in sustainable development, who would be the Urban Renewal Director, Kristen Rutherford, and it seems like we've got some expertise in the staff. I will also tell you that the Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development has a whole task force on greenhouse gas and environmental plans, and they have a person there named Cody Meyer who can come out and help with us and do a lot of other things. I think we're still at the not so far along in the planning process that we cannot form another group, and I would be happy to serve on it.
Yes, Councilor McCoy.
I have no problems with having at some point the council take up a climate action plan. Makes sense to me. I have no problems dealing with that. Heard the citizens in the outreach here. I do have a problem saying that we're going to have a work group just for a climate action plan in the strategic plan. To me, if you want to take that step, then let's make it a work group on environmental needs or actions for the community, one of which clearly would be a climate action plan. But let's make it a little more broad-based and not so specific that we're ignoring other environmental issues or needs that could and probably do exist that we're not addressing, just for that fact.
In fact, I was trying to start little, but I think maybe I should go big here, and so I would change my motion to say to have a working group on environmental action plan rather than climate action plan.
And who is second on this?
That was me, and I'm happy to.
Are you happy to do that?
Yeah.
Okay. Councilor Cook?
Just as a point of clarification, we do have a sustainability work group that was changed to fiscal sustainability
Yeah,
work group.
sustainability is fiscal sustainability, not.
If we wanted to broaden that.
You'd have some problems.
All right.
Yeah. We're pretty well down the road on that one right now.
I stand corrected.
Yeah, and to give us a chance to review the environmental action plan. And I think people probably are, as we heard from a number of the folks testifying in favor of the climate action plan, they were unaware of how much the city of Salem does. It gives us a chance to pull all that together and see how it all fits together, along with any other actions that are needed. So it's a broader, I think that's what I hear the councilor saying. Councilor Ninke.
Thank you. And when that environmental action plan went in place, I was arguing for a different structure as well through more of the ISO 14000 piece, and Councilor Clem at the time was working for the state, and that was kind of their methodology, and so his path won out on that.
Yeah.
But ultimately they get back to the same thing. You have to have, what are my goals, objectives, and targets? What are my plans to get there? Which are all inside of what we have now. We have staff from all different departments functioning in those groups as well. If you're going to do that, that's what I do for a living as well. So
Right.
I like to sit in
Chair
on
that? Okay.
Well,
Thank you for offering. Yeah, I've been receiving a substantial amount of information too on these issues that I have found really interesting and really helpful from the National Mayors Association and other organizations, and I think there is actually a huge amount of information that is surprisingly not quite as specific as we heard tonight. It actually talks about a much broader discussion and really talks about an environmental approach that we've had for 20 years, I think, as Councilor Smaldone pointed out tonight. And we're seeing some other things happening at the state level. They've now changed real smartly changed the name of the Department of Energy, given its history, to the Department of Energy and Climate. So hopefully they won't be ruining that part of it too, but we'll see how that all goes. So I think this is a real opportunity, Councilor Nanke, for you to continue the hard work you've done on environmental issues.
Yeah, and there's a lot of misinformation out there as well.
Okay.
And costs, and, global versus U.S. involved in lots of different things, so.
Well, and I think Mr. Evans
We need to be
brings up all those
careful.
poor people
We
sitting
need
in
to
the
be
smog
careful
over in
to
West
actually
Salem,
push
choking
that down to the, what can we logically do in the 3 to 5 year time frame? Because otherwise, just the work group could take
Right.
decades.
Okay, I think, you okay? Ready to go? Okay, this is the Environmental Action Plan. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Very good. Better hear about that third bridge during that thing too, huh?
I heard idling by schools.
I did too.
They're sitting right there.
Yeah. Okay, first readings.
Okay, ordinance bill number 1717, an ordinance relating to an update of Salem Sign Code, Salem Revised Code, Chapter 900, amending SRC 900.015, .025, .030, .035, .040, .090, 160, 165, 170, 200, 205, 210, 215, 220, 235, 240, 245, 250, repealing SRC 900.260 and creating new provisions 900, 221, 222, and 251.
So what do we need, a motion? McCoy?
I move staff recommendation.
Second.
Second by Ossick. Any discussion?
Well,
I'm sorry, you go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, as I understand this and reading this, planning commissions reviewed this, went through it procedurally, and are making these recommendations. So we've sort of gone through the process already, and now it comes to us for
Okay,
approval.
great. Councilor Kaser.
I move to make a substitute motion to conduct first reading and schedule a public hearing on the ordinance bill.
Second.
Second by Cook.
Looking through the staff report, this has gone through a lot of public process already, but there's a lot of concern about the neighborhoods here, and I think it deserves a public hearing as we usually do for our code amendments.
Okay.
Jamie has to stay with us longer.
Yeah, Amy's retiring. Have you got somebody? Have you got a new Amy? There she is.
Yeah, we have a new Amy, and his name is
Okay.
Aaron, so
Very good.
he won't be too happy, but he will be
Okay.
here.
All right, we have a motion to have a public hearing.
Actually, yeah, because
All-
I have some issues as well.
Yeah. Okay, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Okay, second readings.
Ordinance bill number 1117, an ordinance allowing multiple family residential use in the PH zone, amending SRC 543.005 and 702.005. Counselor Nanke.
Aye.
Counselor McCoy.
Aye.
Counselor Ossick.
Aye.
Counselor Hoy.
Aye.
Counselor Cook.
Aye.
Counselor Lewis. Oh, excuse me, absent. Counselor Kaser.
Aye.
Counselor Anderson.
Aye.
And Mayor Bennett.
Yes, aye. Okay.
Ordinance Bill 1817, an ordinance declaring certain territory located at 3652 and 3672 Malley Place, southeast, annexed to the city of Salem, prescribing zoning and withdrawing the territory from the Marion County Fire District Number 1, the East Salem Sewer District and the Suburban East Salem Water District. Counselor McCoy?
Aye.
Counselor Ossig?
Aye.
Counselor Hoy?
Aye.
Counselor Cook?
Aye.
Counselor Kaiser?
Aye.
Counselor Anderson?
Aye.
Counselor Nanki? Aye. And Mayor Bennett?
Aye. Okay. It's the, anyone here, anyone want to make public comment? Okay, then we are adjourned.